bad things about me as a consequence. However, the interesting part is that liberals on Twitter also found my argument or my question that I put to JF to be a bad question fundamentally in itself. So that's how we're having this stream now. And I guess we'll get to the bottom of what people are thinking about this, why we're having this conversation, etc., etc. And obviously, I'll try to be good, and I won't do anything. I won't bite anyone's head off or anything like this. So. Hi, Justin. Good to have you on.
Hi, Ray.
How are you? Give us your introduction and so on.
So my name is Justin. I'm a leftist, tiny little leftist content creator. I make videos on social issues, trans rights, science, and comedy, of all things, on my tiny little YouTube channel. So you can follow me on SJW Debates on Twitter and on YouTube if you are so inclined. Or you can troll me. Interaction's good for the algorithm, so go ahead and troll me. It's fine.
Okay, so, I guess you should start, since, you're the one bringing the criticism to me. So, in your estimation, in that scenario, what do you guys think that I did wrong?
So I think that JF's fundamental position was one he had already coming into the debate. He already thinks that people of different races should be separated into different lands. That's something he already had coming into the debate. And that's something a lot of his fans already have coming into the debate. A lot of white nationalists will say that, well, yes, since white people deserve their own lands, that means we want black people to have their own lands. We want Japanese people to have their own lands. We want to, and however arbitrary many number of races that they define should all have their own lands because they don't want any race mix and they want all the races to be separated. And so that's a position that he held coming into that debate, and that's kind of a troll question that we ask white nationalists. Well, if white people get their own ethno-state, shouldn't everybody else get their own ethno-state? It's a question we ask to kind of troll them to show how ridiculous it is. And they've kind of taken that trolling up on his word. They've kind of taken that trolling to heart and said, yeah, they should get their own lands, but on our terms. So I don't think that you fundamentally changed his mind or brought up some kind of gotcha question. So I'm a little bit. You said that you are very good at convincing people. So you've been doing this a while. So I want you to convince me, well, why that was a good idea. Why that was a win for you? Because you've described this debate as a win for you.
Okay, the reason I thought that was a great idea was because of the fact, that specific conversation was a good idea. It was because I just come from the fact that liberals who I was talking to on this issue, had said to me that they would not consider the idea of returning the lands to the original inhabitants, etc., in any context, it's at any volume, at any amount, or whatever, and that this was supposedly a left position somehow. So I was like, okay, interesting idea. What if I had a conversation with someone who is definitely on the right and find out whether this person will take a more accommodating stance towards this than the people who profess to be on the left? So me being on that stream, I thought to myself, well, I've got a set number of talking points that I need to get out there to see how he's going to respond to them. Now, again, my conversation with JF was completely in good faith. I just asked him the questions, and he gave the responses as he saw fit. Some of the responses were a little bit unexpected, others not so unexpected. So when I put the question to him about Native American land, it was not a gamble. It was not a gamble I was taking there, or at least not a very big gamble, because I had a feeling that he was going to give me a response that was something like that. Because there's only two possible responses that he would have been able to give me at that point that would be consistent with everything else that he had set up to that point in the stream. Because he was very insistent during that stream on saying that, you have to respect contracts and so on and so forth, which is something he was saying during his conversation on gender and marriage and whatever, right? So I thought this is an interesting and opportune conversation in which to actually pose this question to see if he will contradict himself or not. So on contract, clearly he seems to be in favor of honoring the contracts because he remained consistent. He didn't say, "Oh no, suddenly I don't respect contracts anymore." No.
Wait. I have to stop you here. Do you think that his answer was because he respected contract, or some different fundamental axiom that he's working from?
Well, I'll get to that as well. And the other axiom, which is that clearly, JF has race realist inclinations of some sort, right? Because he has white identitarians in his chat, and he seems to not be offended by them. And he makes a lot of white identitarian talking points himself.
No, he is a white nationalist.
And he could be broadly identified as a white nationalist. So when I put the question to him that basically North America, lands that white nationalists keep talking about all the time. To what extent is this really a thing where we're supposed to just sit there and let that be a thing that they keep talking about? So I guess the most incisive thing that I could have asked him was, does he recognize that Native Americans are actually the original inhabitants of that land, and that they should be able to be given back the property which actually belongs to them?
Why do you think he answered yes to that question?
For him to have said yes to that is quite interesting because of two reasons. The first reason it's interesting is because clearly he's doing what I would call, again, an attempt to remain consistent, which is that it would be kind of unreasonable for him to literally say to my face that I'm supposed to somehow respect his claims about Europe, and then simultaneously have him, subtly reverse the scenario when we talk about something else. So he is different from many white nationalists in that respect, because about 90% of them that I've talked to would not have given that response. Usually they then start to suddenly talk about right of conquest or the infeasibility of actually returning things to people that they've been stolen from, etc., etc. So he would be in the slim 10% of white nationalists I've encountered that have actually given me a yes response to that question. So it's very rare. But I had a feeling that he would give a yes response based on his previous answers to other questions I had been asking up to that point. The other thing which I think would have motivated him to give a yes response in that scenario is because of his unique positionality, as he is speaking from the position of someone with ties to Quebec. And from experience, people who tend to live in Quebec for some reason have outlier opinions on many of these issues, because I think they have a different relationship, or at least they perceive themselves to have a different relationship with Native Americans than Anglo-Saxons do. So that may also have been a reason as to why there was a high probability that he would give a different response to that question than the normal.
Can I give you a third possible reason he gave that answer? He thinks people of different races are fundamentally incompatible with one another, and he thinks that Native Americans should be separated from white people because we cannot coexist.
Well, someone in the chat is saying, Jan DeWitt in the chat is saying that, quote, JF has spoken at length about how he thinks what happened to Native Americans was tragic. It's a sentiment held by many Quebecois.
Do you think he's being truthful when he says that? Do you think he cares?
I can't know for sure. I mean, much of what he said to me in that interview, obviously, there's no way for me to see inside of his mind and know for sure as to whether what he's saying is sincere or not. But the fact that he was willing to at least go on the record and give me an affirmative response was more than any of the liberals I had spoken to in the previous 2 weeks were willing to give me.
When every single response he gives for why a certain population or a certain culture is doing poorly, every single response he gave during that debate and in almost every interaction he's had within the past couple of years has been related to IQ. They're just fundamental IQ differences.
He kept bringing that up all the time, and obviously I was trying not to let that talking point be emphasized all the time. So obviously, in the way that I responded to him was, I proposed alternate explanations for many of the things that he brought forward, so that people could consider those also, because I'm sure that his audience completely gets the IQ argument forefronted all the time. So I was just presenting, other explanations for phenomena that they could consider. So I don't think that I did the wrong thing there either, because I think that when you're faced with that kind of scenario, you can do one of two things. Either you can essentially throw all the toys out of the pram and be like, no, I don't like this conversation. Or you can say, well, okay, I hear you on that, but here are some of the other factors that could actually be influencing it that might not be related to IQ at all. Also, there's the other thing about IQ, which we didn't get around to talking about, but I wanted to raise the point that these IQ tests that were administered to people, I doubt the veracity of many of them.
Yes, so why didn't you bring those things up? Why didn't you test the validity of IQ?
In fact, I did to some extent.
To some extent, but you didn't. Yes, but you didn't push back very hard.
I did to some extent attack the concept of it when I talked about Thailand, where I asked him to explain to me how it was that they measured Thailand and it was one value 10 years previously, and then it was a completely radically different value, a higher value 10 years after that. To which I guess neither him nor his audience actually gave me a coherent response to how that could be possible. But the strong implication in my question is that there's something wrong with these tests if it's capable of producing that result.
There was no strong I have to really disagree with that.
I think that any reasonable person listening to that
I'm a very reasonable person.
A serious measure of
I'm
reality.
a very reasonable person. Let me tell you why I think that you acquiesced to his point way too much when describing.
His followers don't think that was what happened. His followers at the same time
we can't know that either. Hold on, we can't know that either. Hold on.
His followers.
Well, you were talking for a long time there. Come on.
Well, just hold on. His followers in the chat at the same time were accusing me of not respecting IQ tests. So, I mean, I got the impression that they thought that that was what I was saying.
Yes, that doesn't mean that they are countered by your point. You also said that you could be convinced either way, that you would be willing to listen to alternative opinions on why IQ tests were different between races. Like he was talking about IQ differences between races, and you say that you were willing to listen to differing opinions on why that might be. So you're giving validity to these differences. In fact, you're giving validity to the concept of race realism just by acknowledging these questions. Built into his questions is an inherent assumption that race is real, that it's a genetic reality.
Well, I mean, built into the idea that you should return lands to people that they've been stolen from, it seems that people exist and that they're real and you can find them.
That's very vacuous. That doesn't mean anything. So what do you mean? Do you think
Isn't that what you're coming to criticize me on? The fact that I dare to say that Native Americans could actually own things.
All right, let's back up even further. Do you think that race is a taxonomic classification that exists in the genetics of people?
Depends on what you're talking about.
I mean, I was very deliberate with my wording there. Do you think it's a genetic reality that we can classify people into different races on a taxonomic basis?
The phylogenetic reality. You can assign computers to it, and they will be able to separate out population groups. It doesn't always actually come out to be correct, but you get broadly correct based on like land barriers and stuff like this that are obviously inhibiting the transfer of
all of that was, again, that's vacuous. Do you think that you can separate people into different races?
It's very specific.
Do you think that you can separate people into different races based on their genetics?
Such as what?
Exactly. Like, if you're going to separate people into different races, you need to know what the boundaries are and how you're going to do that separation. You can't just punt the question into saying, well, it depends on what you define race as. Like, no.
Well, I mean, the reason I'm asking these questions, I'm wondering if you're leading me into some kind of weird questioning.
Okay, I'll ask it deliberately as straightforward as I can. Do you think that race is a taxonomic reality? And if you want me to explain that a little bit further, I can.
Yes, please do, just to make sure that we're not misunderstanding each other.
Okay, when I say taxonomic reality, I'm referring to the biological differences between group differences. So the research that I'm familiar with is related to the fixation index, so FST values, and they tell you how similar how similar a group is to itself compared to how similar it is to a different group.
Exactly. Okay, fair enough. Yes, because I assume your next question to me is going to be, how can you give reparations or allocate land back to Native Americans if you believe that it's not possible to detect who is Native American and who is not?
Yeah, that's actually well, that's not where I was going with that, but that's a great question. What determines at what point is someone Native American and at what point aren't they? If a Native American has
So, do you accept that your position, if I take it to its logical conclusion, makes social justice on the issue of race impossible?
No.
Why not?
You can accept the social realities of race while also denying the biologic lies.
If you deny the biological realities, then how do you find who to allocate the land to when you finish stealing it?
Because do you understand the difference between a social truth and a biological truth?
Yes.
Okay, so we all agree that money exists, correct? This is something that we brought up a lot. Okay, there's no biologic basis in money. So we can agree that money exists and that it's important, but we can also agree that it doesn't exist biologically. So we can say that race...
Okay, so how does this apply to the concept of race?
It's because we can say that race exists...
Or ethnic groups, I should say.
Because we can say that race exists because since we perceive they exist, people have been historically marginalized on the basis of this false biologic assumption. And then we can make reparations and policy decisions based on that. That doesn't make the race
But
real.
who would you make reparations to if you don't think that the people exist?
When I say reparations, I mean policy decisions that impact disproportionately affected groups. So in terms of black people, I do think there are a lot of policy decisions that we can do that will not uniquely benefit black people, but will disproportionately benefit black people in terms of how historically we have enacted laws. For example,
sure.
marijuana
I mean, by your
laws.
own logic, why would it even matter? Because I mean, think about it this way: you could just argue then that since apparently ancestry has no impact on anything at all, you could just claim that okay.
Do you think that that's an honor position that I hold?
Well, I'm saying that that's where you end up. Like,
no, it's not. Do you think that's an honor position I hold?
Okay, the reason you're coming to me about this is because you're claiming that we shouldn't, I should say, because it doesn't involve me at all, but you're saying that you, as in you, the Americans, should not return to Native Americans the lands which were seized from them up to the point of treaties being violated and etc. Because you're saying that since ethnicity does not actually exist in your view,
in biological reality, Hold on.
then therefore
Represent
there's
my
no
views correctly,
obligation you have
please.
toward any of these people.
Hold on. Represent my views correctly, please. When I say ethnicity does not exist, I mean from a biological perspective. Of course, we think that race exists because it's been socially, not socially. It is a reality that we have been ingrained in. It is a social construct, and social constructs are real.
Okay, so now I'll attack this from a different angle then. Why do you guys actually care as to whether I see it as one thing or the other thing, given that the policy preference is the same?
I can walk you back all the way to my fundamental axiom.
For example, and we just say, okay, let's just pretend for a moment that it's completely a social reality, it's all in our heads, and I still think they need to be reimbursed for the things that were stolen from them. Why are people still objecting to that?
So here's two things that I can approach this from. One, I can go all the way back to my fundamental axiom. How do I base all of my morality, policy decisions, and data interpretation on? So I think in my fundamental axiom is I want to reduce the amount of human suffering in the world as much as possible. Okay? And correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
Please correct me if I'm wrong. But the end result of what you're saying is that we would deport everyone who is not Native Americans off the lands that they were, assigned? Is that the right word in these treaties?
So you think they shouldn't honor the treaties that were signed by white people because to actually honor them would cause suffering to those very same people who have broken the treaties, and that therefore, in order to reduce human suffering,
hold on. When you say people who broke the treaties,
not honor treaties, is that what we're talking about?
Hold on. When you say those same people who broke the treaties, who are you talking about? When you say those same people who broke the treaties,
the hegemonic white dominant population of the United States.
So
that's what I'm talking about.
So you think? Whoa! Let's stop right there. You think that white people have a genetic predisposition, a genetic responsibility for actions taken in the past? A genetic one, not a policy decision one, not a policy one. A genetic link.
Do you think that white hegemony exists then?
No. When you say hegemony, what do you mean?
Okay, so do you believe that white people have structural advantages in the United States that have accrued because of actions taken by their ancestors in the past?
Yes, I do not think that it's based in genetics, though. So when you say these people who didn't honor these treaties, the white people didn't. The U.S. government didn't. The U.S. government happened to be a white supremacist government, but that does not mean white people genetically did this.
So, okay, that's interesting. So doesn't that place you basically in the same position as arguments we've heard many times from Republicans as well, in which they will look you dead in the face and be like, yeah, it technically wasn't me. So even though they're benefiting from it completely, then I have no responsibility to this at all.
No, because what Republicans will say is that black people or Native American people or any historically marginalized group of people don't deserve any sort of help because, well, I didn't do it, so I shouldn't have to suffer to do it. When they say that, though, I'm about to explain it. I'm about to explain it if you let me finish. When they say it, they don't want any sort of government intervention or government program that's going to benefit other people disproportionately. That's what they mean when they say it. They're not saying that. They're not saying that white people are going to hurt. Hold on. They're not saying that. What I'm saying, they're not saying when they are against reparations, they're not against it because white people are going to be harmed. They're against it because other people who aren't white are going to benefit from it, and they don't like that. That's where they're coming from. Where I'm coming from.
What's the functional difference?
Because where I'm coming from is to deport everyone who is not Native American from everywhere west of the Mississippi is going to cause immeasurable harm, not just to white people, but also to black people, also to any sort of Asian people who are there, also to the Native Americans who are going to have their infrastructure that they've relied on for their economic and social well-being completely decimated.
Well, I gave several compromise scenarios here in which I said that the point at which we're talking about in terms of treaties and objects returned could be done in alternative ways if people thought that this was a problem, right?
So what is the way that you would like to go forward?
I did not specify what those were, but everyone objected not on the specifics, everyone objected on the principle. And this is something that we're getting away from here. So you all objected on the principle of giving things to people on the basis of their ethnic origin at all.
If you can convince me that your proposal is going to reduce the overall amount of human suffering, I'm all ears. What is your specific proposal?
Okay, I'll just come up with one now. Hypothetically, let's say that instead of returning land, even though I think that land should be returned, let's say that hypothetically, instead of returning land, there was a gigantic sum of money which was taken and allocated to all of the people who were negatively affected by this, who happen to be Native American. which would then allow them to set up in places that they want to set up, and perhaps create actually vibrant communities of their own instead of them being confined to reservations in which there is generally a level of quality of life which is not so great, right? Now, on this issue, full objections from everyone again, because again, to even enunciate that idea is to say that these nations of people actually exist and can be found biologically, so that you could actually take from the U.S. government treasury.
Okay, I was with you until you said found biologically. At what point? No, at well, identity.
Straw poll and be like, hey, identity. Anyone who thinks they're Native American, come here.
Identity. Leaders of the tribes would allocate this money. Leaders appointed by this community.
Well, I mean, we've heard that one before, but do we trust leaders of tribes to allocate this money at this point?
If you're an eighth Native American, do you get an eighth of the reparations?
I don't know.
If you want to improve
we've moved far beyond your original challenge, which is that why are we actually looking at
my original? All right, my challenge right now. I will restate my challenge to you. How does this decrease human suffering? So what you're saying, if you can paint the scenario where that reduces suffering, I'm all ears. So what you just said sounded very, very reasonable. There'll be increase because Native American reservations in both the United States and Canada are dog shit. The people who live there in poverty, there's a lot of abuse. Yes, they are dog shit. If we want to allocate resources, including money, and maybe even land to improve those scenarios, I'm all for that. That is way different, though, than your...
So then why would you want to also expand the borders of those reservations to give them autonomy over their own land?
What happens to the people...
in fact, some of these people shouldn't even be in reservations in the sense that they have been moved hundreds of miles away from the places that they originally would have lived. So why... If it were possible to actually reverse that, why would you not be, in principle, in favor of that?
Because, one, are you asking those people? Do they want to be moved from the place that they grew up?
Well, in fact, what a brilliant question. I'll now bring that up. So, top of my Twitter right now is a story called Cherokee Nation Names First Delegate to Congress, right? And I'm just going to read a couple paragraphs from it because you've got to do at least one article in these live streams. Otherwise, what are we doing? So I'll read the whole thing out, and then basically, by the time we reach the end, I'm sure the people in the chat will already be falling asleep or calling me a Nazi for no apparent reason.
You could just link it. You could just link it in chat, right?
And I'll put the link there as well so they can actually see it as I'm doing it. So hold on. No. It's an NPR article, so I'm just going to link directly to it.
Yeah, Cherokee Nation names first delegate to Congress.
Yes, and I'll read the opening couple of paragraphs. Right, so I have linked that in the chat. So, reading voice. The Cherokee Nation has named its first delegate to the U.S. House of Representatives. Former Obama appointee Kimberly Teehee's nomination was approved by the Tribes Council on Thursday. Although the treaty that created this non-voting position is almost 200 years old, it has never been filled. The article outlining the right to a delegate is in the Treaty of New Echota. The 1835 treaty is also the document that led to the Trail of Tears, something that has been top of the mind for Teehee. She points out the treaty gave up the Cherokees' homelands and cost the tribe thousands of lives. Quote, literally blood, sweat, and tears, Teehee said. We can't ignore that history and what it meant for us to have a provision like that put in place given the devastation that occurred and the deaths that occurred. Teehee grew up in Oklahoma and cut her teeth in politics in the 1980s, interning for Wilma Mankiller, the first woman to become chief of the Cherokee Nation. Mankiller had led the tribe at a time when it was reasserting its sovereignty on both the state and national level. Teehee says that watching Mankiller become one of the most effective Cherokee chiefs in modern history was inspiring. Quote, she let me go to meetings with her. I got to travel with her, got to research for her, she said. She was so hands-on with me. I loved it. Mankiller advised Teehee that when she returned to college from her internship, the young woman should consider getting a law degree. Quote, because there's a lot of Indian issues being litigated in the federal courts, and those decisions are having an impact on tribes, and it's going to become more complicated to lead, Teehee said.
Okay.
Teehee would go on to get that law degree, and later she worked for Democratic National Committee as a Hill staffer and then an Obama appointee. Teehee has been an outside figure on Capitol Hill for decades when it comes to Indian country policy. Her fingerprints are on a wide variety of policy and laws affecting Indigenous people, from the Violence Against Women Act to the creation of Congress's first Native American caucus.
Okay. Do you think that's enough for now?
Yeah, I can stop there. So, going backwards from this point, because it's weird to have to ask these questions, but because of the fact that we are where we are right now, I have to ask them. So, in terms of the Native American caucus, do you all think that a Native American caucus should exist if
Yes.
you're also simultaneous.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
So, okay. So
Just like I think
who
a
would
Black
the
Caucus should
American
exist
Caucus
too.
be representing in your view?
Native Americans, but based on identity.
Okay.
Can someone join a Native American tribe if they are not genetically linked to that tribe? Do you think someone could fully assimilate into that tribe and hold all their values and all their goals if they are 100% black?
Wait, what?
Do you think that you can advocate on behalf of Native American people and join their community and be a part of their community and want their community to thrive and prosper because it is your own?
I see where you're going with this. So, I mean, what would the odds be that someone would try to do that if they have if they've essentially? Are you talking about a person who has not known them and has simply entered from out of nowhere?
I'm saying not out of nowhere and not known them. I'm saying they've gotten to know people. Perhaps they had friends who talked to them and they really liked all of the axioms and values that Native Americans have, and they wanted to live by those values and they wanted to help that community. I think you can kind of agree that oftentimes we have more in common and we value our relationships more beyond our familiar bonds, beyond our genetic links. Like we find comfort in friends and community outside of our family. Do you think that could happen?
I'd be a little skeptical, but I mean, who knows? I mean, it's difficult to say. But I mean,
how is your position different? How is someone
an argument against having?
No, because this is the exact same argument a racist is going to make. Is how is a brown person going to hold all of my values? They're brown. That is the exact same argument. How is your position fundamentally different than theirs?
How is my position fundamentally different from that? It isn't.
It isn't. So you think that a brown person who comes over to the United States from a completely different culture can never hold our values because they're not genetically linked to the United States?
Well, I mean, I'm speaking as a person of color myself. I mean, I went to the United Kingdom. I'm never going to hold their values.
So what would you say to all of my Asian friends here in the United States who seem to get along really, really fine? Who have
it's possible to get along very fine while also disagreeing with them on a number of key issues. Like, I mean, I get along fine out here all the time, but like, you know, if people drill down with me on political issues, on certain issues, I'm going to be like, well, I don't agree. I can't, right? But the reason it doesn't cause problems is because the things we disagree on do not seem to be sufficient enough to cause it to be impossible to live in the particular location.
So you think that someone of a certain race
to claim that it's possible for people from one community to somehow magically adopt the full wholesale values of another and have it just see a seamless transition? Why would that happen? Also, why should that happen?
Because people can think how they want to think, and they like ideas and they like people, independent of where they come from. That's why.
It's possible to like people without becoming them, though.
Okay, what does it mean to become
the British people are quite charming. It's just that I would not deceive myself into thinking that I could ever become them.
So you have said that white people are a what hegemony? How did you pronounce that word? I'm sorry.
Hegemonic
force in the United States. As in
those who have hegemony.
Okay, so do you think that white people in the United States all advocate for the same things because we are of the same genetic lineage?
Not in all cases, because they obviously have ideological differences among themselves. However, there is something quite interesting in the fact that I can find on the center right and on the center left basically variations of this same talking point, which seem to come back to one thing, which is that they don't want to give back lands to the people that they've robbed it from. I mean, that to me would seem to be some kind of ethnic interest in play there, that no matter which ideological position I talk to, with some exceptions, such as JF, who I talked to yesterday, but he's not actually American.
I've told you why I'm against that.
From Quebec.
Can you reiterate my point that why I'm against that? Can you reiterate what I said to you?
Yes, you're against it because you say that it will cause suffering, human suffering, which you are not willing to countenance.
Right.
But I mean, these are separate explanations, but with the same overall outcome, which is that the specific policy preference that I'm asking people to adopt, they will not adopt it
because it will cause human suffering.
And they have different explanations each time, but they broadly run along the same idea. Like if I were having a conversation with the center right would just say the same thing, but in reverse, where they'd say that they don't believe that we should be allocating quote privileges, which is an ironic word for them to use in this case, but privileges to people on the basis of ethnicity.
I agree. Their reasoning is dumb, especially their understanding of the word privilege. I agree that's dumb. What I'm asking is, from my perspective, this is the purpose of talking to me instead of a group of people that you built up in your head. Why is my position bad there? What is wrong with my position that I don't want to increase human suffering? And I think that deporting everybody who is not Native American to whatever extent I guess that would entail, and I think that would increase human suffering immensely. I think I could have data that would prove that. And why is that a fundamentally untenable position?
Repeat that again.
I'm sorry. I'll try to sum it up. Why is my position that I think I could support with data and reason that deporting everybody deporting everyone who's not Native American to give their land back would cause immense human suffering, not just to white people, but to every other person, including the Native Americans, who are going to have a lot of their resources taken away from them, as well as a lot of
What do
their
you mean
friends.
their resources taken away from them? I mean,
Friends.
you've already taken them away.
Friends, people that they've made contacts with, potential, like a lot of them are going to date people outside of their tribe, outside of their race. They're going to lose them. Children. What happens if you have a child?
Okay, here's a question I'll put to you before I answer that question. We've had a lot of conversation going on, particularly in Japan recently, about the issue of when are right-wing people in Japan going to actually address the issue of the fact that despite the fact that if you look at the ethnogenesis of the Japanese people, you obviously find the different inputs that came from different locations. And so, of course, you have the input from the Southern Korean peninsula. You have the input from that part of Southeast Asia where the Hmong people presently live. Yeah, and you have the input from the north, which is like 40% Jomon on top of that, which is basically how you identify, if you're using a computer, is how you identify a Japanese person, because of the fact that there are no other population groups in the world aside from the Ainu themselves who have those markers, right? So
can I ask you just a question about computer
Let
identification?
me finish the question.
Okay.
The reason I asked this question is that within the Japanese archipelago itself, there have been lots and lots of wars, as you well know, in which people were reallocated positions or had them taken away, etc., etc. And if we look to the far north, in Hokkaido, you will find that the Ainu people should have had a claim to large swathes of that land, if not the entire landmass itself, in the north of what is now known as the state of Japan. Do you agree that the Japanese state should honor the fact that the Ainu people were inhabitants of that land prior to the existence of the Japanese state as we know it today, and that they should be afforded a level of autonomy?
What I'm going to ask you is the same question I've asked you several times now. Will doing what you just proposed decrease human suffering?
I'm sure there's some Japanese person in Hokkaido who might suffer as a result of that.
Some Japanese person.
Do you think,
or a lot of people?
Do you think that it's morally wrong for me to propose the idea that we should give way on that?
So we've actually asked this question before, and I wanted to. It was in a conversation with like 20 other people, and I never got answered, which wasn't entirely your fault. Why do you think justice is good? Do you think justice is good in and of itself, or do you think justice is a means to some greater end?
Justice is a means to creating right human relations.
That seems like a tautology. Justice is it's a means to create justice.
Well, no, right human relations is when you have you've reduced the amount of aggression, and all ethnic groups have the right to defend themselves in their own civic space and to maintain conditions of life that allow them to continue to exist.
That was very similar to a tautology. You're saying that
That's not a
justice.
tautology.
Justice is right because it's right. Justice is right because it upholds rights. I'm saying, why is it important to uphold rights? Is there something deeper than that?
Really?
Yes.
Well, there's nothing deeper than that. Sorry.
All right.
I'm not going to do that.
All right. So I could go deeper than that and saying that. Based on the thing that you just said, justice is important because it allows people autonomy and desires. And if we do that, it will decrease human suffering. That's where I get to. Again, that's as deep as I go. That's my fundamental axiom that I start with when I'm looking at these
And so
things.
you think that any form of justice that results in an increase in suffering is actually not justice. Is that what your claim is?
No, I'm saying it's justice. I'm saying it's wrong. If it increases human suffering, it could be justice. But it's wrong because it increases human suffering.
Okay, well then this creates a really strange scenario. Let's say, for example, a minority group is a minority, and the majority are the ones who have done something which is inappropriate, right?
Yep.
And that repairing that wrong results in the majority who have perpetrated this to feel suffering, quote unquote. So would you say that then, therefore, the wrong should not be fixed because the amount of suffering caused in the majority would be too great?
When you say feel suffering, what do you mean?
Like, would it be dispossessed of something, or would have some economic hit that they would take as a result?
So let's take this to a real example. Do I think that the right-leaning Republicans who do not want reparations for black people, do I think that they're quote-unquote suffering? Which would be entirely, they don't like it because they're not getting anything.
Yeah, I mean, those are the people you're talking about in this case, partially. Yeah. So, I mean...
Yeah,
yes,
no,
I mean,
that's not suffering.
You think that they're the ones suffering in this scenario?
No, they're not suffering. When I'm talking about suffering, I'm talking about being removed from the place that you grew up. That is suffering. Being removed from all the economic opportunities that you had built up for yourself. Being removed from all your friends and family, including the people who are apparently getting the land. Like, what happens if you have Native American friends?
How do you think that might feel for the indigenous peoples of the land who have to grow up with that as their actual reality already?
That's horrible. If they're suffering, I want to produce that.
Not having an actual homeland, except you're actually standing on it, and then the same people who are walking around.
Whoa! What do you mean having an actual homeland? Like, do you think that I have a homeland? Where's my homeland? Let's test this. You said that you would suffer if you think you don't have a homeland.
I'm sure you can actually tell me. Where did your ancestors come from before they were in America?
I don't care because it doesn't matter. I grew up in Kentucky. That's where I'm from. I'm not from Scotland. I'm not from England. I'm from Kentucky. That's where I grew up. Yes, if there are people...
I hate to impose privilege on this, but this is something that I think only white people in this world can do. And this
yes, and that's a problem.
Interestingly enough, only white people can do this, because if I pranced around the world doing whatever I wanted, which, by the way, I have done, whenever you do that, no one's going to look at you and be like, yeah, you don't come from anywhere. We're just going to say that you are from wherever you are. Literally, that does not happen.
Yes, and you're advocating that it should happen. That's what your position is. When you see an Asian person in Kentucky, where I grew up, your position is to say, well, A, you're not from Kentucky. I don't care if you were born here. You're actually from China. That's where you're from. That's what you're advocating for. That's your exact position, is it not?
And the reason I asked this question then is, do you not think that Native Americans feel kind of bad about the fact that you guys have just declared their territory to be a free-for-all for all human beings?
Yes, and I want to decrease their suffering.
Into someone else's territory, take it over against their will, and then turn around afterwards and be like, this is now an open zone for like everyone who wants to come here can come here, and also making sure that, you know, a specific group of people are kept on top all the time, which is basically how America has been running.
So how do we go forward?
Scenario to you.
How can we go forward to reduce their suffering as much as possible while not enormously impacting millions, hundreds of millions of other people?
Okay, well, I'll put it to you this way, and this is another one of those questions where I hate to ask it. Do you think that the feelings of white Americans trump justice in this case, then?
What do you mean feelings? That's a very vacuous word.
Well, I mean, you're the one talking about human suffering, so we are talking about feelings here in some sense.
Yes, and when I'm talking about suffering, I'm not talking about, well, I see something I don't like. I'm talking some kind of existential dread that can be measured almost physiologically. Like, I don't have enough food to eat. Oh, I'm extremely stressed because I don't have anywhere to live. That's what I'm talking about suffering. I'm not talking about, someone over there is doing something that I don't like. That's not what I'm talking. That's not suffering. So any policy position that you propose that would make white people feel bad, I don't care. Does it help the Native American people? And does it actually cause suffering to white people? I don't care. If you can propose a scenario where that happens, yeah, absolutely.
How can you even claim that you're reducing all suffering and have everyone win? In your scenario, how does everyone win?
One, I don't separate people into groups like you do. I want to decrease all of human suffering. Now, it just so happens, based on the history of the United States in particular, there are certain racial groups. It doesn't matter if they're biological or not. They've been socially discriminated against in the past. They have been disproportionately affected by policies in the past. And we should, since they are suffering the most, we should dedicate policies to reducing their suffering. And yes, that is going to require targeting these people.
Okay, so let me just quickly move the example just to see how this holds up. So let's say we're talking about the Russian Federation, which I've wanted to talk about for ages now.
Why are we going to the Russian Federation? We're talking about Native Americans.
The reason we're doing this is I want to re-ask the same question in that context to see whether your concept actually falls apart in any way. I just want to see. So we're talking about the Russian Federation for a second here. Now we know the history of the Russian Federation, which is that obviously it's the political successor of the United Soviet Socialist Republics, which was also pretty bad. And then prior to that was the Russian Empire, which was also very bad. So it's a history of just very bads. So Russian Empire, as we know, after the year 1350, it began to expand because they had a compulsion to, quote, defend themselves by attacking all native groups they encountered and destroying them for some bizarre reason, up until they reached the coast. So it was so bad that it ended up at a point that, like in the mid 1600s and 1700s, Japanese people actually found Russians trying to enter Hokkaido for some reason. To which they were, of course, informed that, guess what, guys? People actually live here, and you can't just go walking across these borders like you own them. But more on that some other day. That's history we don't need to go into. But anyway, Russia creating this large, quote, country in which they have essentially destroyed the livelihoods of many other groups of people. They presently are exploiting the resources of the people that they've conquered in Siberia. They're cutting down the trees. The place is on fire, believe it or not, much like how Brazil is presently experiencing this fire problem of people just going around cutting down stuff because they feel like it and terrorizing natives. The natives actually used to refer to the Russians as the Red Demons because of the fact that every time you would see them coming at you from the 1300s to the 1700s, 1800s, and so on, they'd be coming at you for the purpose of killing you, just automatically, without any dialogue, with no conversation, no trade, no nothing. They're just coming there to hurt you. So there was that. And then now they've got this whole business with Gazprom, in which basically Russia gets to be rich and swagger about promoting its reactionary values around the world because of the fact that they've essentially tapped into what should have been native resources in Siberia. So, I mean, imagine if we played history a different way. Imagine if Russians were not able to get into Siberia and take it over in the way that they did. Can you imagine what Siberia might alternately look like? Or what Alaska might alternately look like, given that these civilizations are, in a sense, linked?
Do you think that human suffering would be reduced if we could do that?
Yes, I do think that human suffering would have been reduced if history had played out that way. Because
cool. As soon as we can go back in time, let's do that. I don't care. So linear time exists, Ray.
Yes, my question to you now, given the abilities that we have as countries that are developed and who have foreign policies and ways of coercing other people to do things that we want, do you think that it is acceptable for us to deliberately pursue a foreign policy which would lead to national liberation movements sprouting up in what Russians believe is their backyard?
Would it decrease human suffering? I'm not familiar with these.
In my view, it would. But of course,
if you can provide if you can provide reason, I don't know anything about that area. I cannot give an informed decision on that either way. But if you can provide data or just even a logical train of thought that would say that this would decrease human suffering in that area and therefore overall in the world, yeah, I'd be for that. I'm being very consistent here. If that policy,
if you're consistent on that, then why would you not also claim the same thing for the United States? I mean, I mentioned Alaska there. Would you be okay with
I literally just said I don't know what the policies that you're proposing are. I'm not familiar with the area. I'm saying that if that were the case, if that would decrease human suffering, I'd be for it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it depends on who you're talking about, because I'm sure that
it does depend on who we're talking about. That's why
would increase human suffering for themselves. For example, let's say that you're a Russian person in Vladivostok, for example, right? And my plan kicks off, and you have a color revolution in Russia or something like this, and the whole place breaks up into like 18 different parts, right? Obviously, white Russians will be extremely upset about this, and will be on social media and perhaps on the news, constantly screaming about how could you all do these color revolutions and cause this country to be broken up. It was a great federation, they will claim, to which, of course, we don't believe it was great, right? So obviously for some people, there will be, quote, human suffering in the sense that they will be deeply inconvenienced by the fact that their kleptocratic state has been broken up, right? So would you say that would be a reason to not have national liberation movements because that some people will be upset?
Is there a better option that decreases human suffering for everybody?
Probably not.
Probably not. If that were the case, then yeah, sure.
Can you imagine a scenario in which Russia becomes fair, equal, and wonderful?
How many times have I said that I don't know anything about that area?
Let's reapply the same concept to the United States then. Or as much as I, I'm slightly loath to actually use the word balkanization, but let's say that Donald Trump wins in 2020.
Oh, God.
And then let's say that like Donald Trump's next acolyte wins in 2024. At what point down the line of this succession of reactionary victories in America would you say that it's time for all of these different groups to go their own way?
What?
Like how long would this have to go for?
Never.
Comparison between the United States and Russia.
What do you mean different groups going their own way?
When would you say that it would be acceptable to have the equivalent of national liberation movements taking place inside the United States territory?
What do you mean different groups going their own way? What do you mean different groups going their own way?
As in going their own way, as in forming their own states. And
what, declaring sovereignty within the United States?
Yes, declaring sovereignty and leaving.
Okay, absolutely. Fuck no, I wouldn't advocate for that. You know why? Because the military action would come down upon them and it would destroy them.
Well, wouldn't that same thing happen in Russia?
I don't know. How many times have I said, I have no idea what's going on in Russia? I'm fully admitting my ignorance here. I know that in the United States, if someone tried to declare sovereignty and separate from the United States, they would be absolutely crushed. And a lot of people would die for zero benefit. No, I would not advocate for that.
So you actually think that, would you say that the U.S. military has the capacity or the orientation to actually wage a war inside the United States against states that have seceded?
We've done that, Ray. We've done that.
Yeah, I mean, you did that in the 1800s. It's different now, though, isn't it?
Yeah, now it's harder. Now it's way harder.
No, how would it be harder now than it was in the 1800s?
We have nukes now, Ray. The difference between what an average civilian has and what the government has is enormous. There's no comparison between what the civilians have now and what the government has now. Okay,
it's an interesting argument. So I'll put to you this one.
It's a true one.
Do you remember the Jeju Island incident in South Korea?
Would it surprise you if I told you no? I don't.
Okay,
why do we keep going off to these different places?
Because I'm trying to find this consistency thing. So
I've been consistent from the get-go.
On the Jeju Island thing, these guys were, let's say, they were dissident in their viewpoint on how South Korea should be run, and the government at the time also found them to be dissident in their viewpoint. And so, what unfortunately happened is that the South Korean government at the time, and of course many of the people who were involved in this, did not get held to account. And this is very unfortunate, but they actually sent the South Korean military into another part of South Korea itself, and they had a big fight. And I think it was about 100,000 people died because of the fact that the government did not want to accept the idea that the people of Jeju Island should be able to determine their own affairs in some way. Now, that is a stain. That is a stain on East Asian history, and it's probably one of the worst incidents of basically government overreach that has occurred in East Asia in quite a while. And obviously there's a long list. So, that's just one thing among a long list of things that illustrate that, sometimes people need to just leave because the government cannot be trusted on some of these issues. So when you say
people can just leave, what do you mean? How can that be done?
What do you mean? Well, that's the question I'm asking you right now.
I don't care about hypotheticals. How do you think that could actually happen? Do I think that how could that actually happen?
Sometimes you have to take risks in order to find out whether you can be free.
Do you think that there is any possible way for anybody, Native Americans or not, to secede from the United States within it? Like to say this portion of Washington is mine.
Well, I said let's say the year is 2024 and like Eric Trump is president. Do you think that the level of competence and the level of what's the word for it? Cohesiveness within the United States and its society at that point would still lend itself to that being an improbable proposition? Or do you think that the division between people would be high enough that when ordered to commit war crimes, they would not commit them?
I'm saying that if that needed to happen, as in if the government was so terrible that we needed an actual real revolution, I'm saying splintering off into
Not
your
even a
own.
revolution, just a section.
No, splintering off into your own racial groups is the absolute stupidest thing you could do. We would need to unite against them, not separate into our own racial groups. All of us, we need to unite against them. Otherwise, you know what they're going to do? They're just going to take them back with the military that they've been building up. Because that's what Trump does. He builds up the military.
From which social source are these guys drawing their support?
What do you mean?
The Trump supporters.
He's been a consistent 40%.
They're not coming from black people. Clearly, they're not coming from African Americans. They're not coming from.
Yeah, there are a lot of uneducated white people in the United States. I agree.
Exactly. So then, why should they? Why on earth should anyone seek to unite with these people? What's the point?
Wait, what do you mean these people? How about me? I'm a white person. I'm a white person. Do you think I can't unite? Do you think I can't unite with trans people and black people and Native American people against Trump?
So is that really your argument against secession in the case that it comes down to 2024 and this stuff is still going on? Like, yes. If it comes down to 2024 and this stuff is still going on, surely that would be a sign that the uniting against him has not worked.
Okay, you've created a hypothetical here. I'm saying that what happens now? If that happened, if this hypothetical actually happened, yeah, seceding from the United States would be the absolute dumbest thing you can do, especially if you're going to splinter off into disparate racial groups. If the Native Americans all decided, okay, we're going to go to the Native American paradise, and all the black people said, okay, we're going to go to the black person paradise in the United States. Yeah, that's the dumbest thing to do. Now you have several weak states that can't stand up to the Trump administration instead of one strong one that might actually do it.
But they would be taking their National Guard with them because states aren't going to secede and then give up all of their stuff, are they?
Jesus. Okay, when you say states, that's a lot of different people. You're not talking about states. You're talking about disparate racial groups.
Perhaps there would be reorganization of where people live. Who knows? But I'm just saying, as a hypothetical, would you say that secession would then be morally suspect in this situation?
Morally suspect?
Or morally bad, wrong, etc.?
Well, in terms of what the people are trying to do to get away from suffering, no. I'm saying the effect would be bad because they'd be taken over and killed. Or subjugated. Human suffering would increase immensely. By the enormous power of the United States military that has been built up over this hypothetical.
Which is created for the purpose of enforcing what?
Enforcing the United States agenda. Or more specifically in this case would be the extreme right-wing Trump agenda.
Okay.
There's nothing in this hypothetical that leads me to believe that this situation where disparate again, you're talking about racial groups separating. There's nothing in this hypothetical that leads me to believe that it's feasible or that it won't cause immense human suffering in the form of splintering off and then becoming weaker and then becoming killed.
Okay.
You understand that if you could paint this scenario in a way that suffering is reduced, that these people could get away from suffering and lead into a better place, I'd be all for it. That's actually why I'm for a lot of the migration occurring across the southern border. I think these people are escaping suffering. I'm all for that. With the scenario you're painting, I don't see that happening.
Okay, so do you not think, and this is another question I was going to ask you, but you've actually brought it to me, which is good. So do you not think that if these people are the original inhabitants of the continent, and they are, then these fake borders, this fake southern border, for example, that people are crossing, and it's supposed to be like hugely controversial if they do something like that, do you not think that eventually, because of the fact, and I've seen someone mention this in chat as well, because of the fact that people naturally tend to congregate with people who behave or have social mores similar to each other.
That's an appeal to that's an appeal to nature. That's not a good argument.
Sure, but I mean we've observed it to have occurred, right?
That's even worse. Like, what do you mean we've observed it to occur? That's vacuous. That means nothing.
Do you not consider that it would eventually turn out the way that it's been described by me anyway, in which you would end up with the southwest of the United States being mostly Hispanic, at which point then you'd have Ann Coulter screaming some incoherency into a microphone somewhere?
I'm saying that there are a lot of places in the United States that are mostly Hispanic, and they're just as American as the white parts.
Just as American?
Yes.
Do you think they would agree with your assessment?
Yes.
Do you think they want to be American?
Yes.
Do you think that they have an understanding of what American means is the same as yours?
No one's American. Well, that's a dumb question. Like, nobody in America thinks the same as I do.
So then
White
what is
people,
the definition?
white people
What is the
in
definition of Americanness?
someone who is a part of American culture and who lives here.
Yeah, but you, as you, Jake, and pretty much everyone else, including myself, have pointed out a million times anyway, how can you define a, quote, American culture, given that there are so many subcultures within the United States?
You know what? You got me.
You know
what? You got me. That was a dumb thing for me to say. There's no such thing as American culture. It's a huge culture, and what American culture is extremely disparate. There's a lot of different subcultures, and a lot of them intermingle with each other, and some of them don't. And you know what? None of it's based on race.
Are you sure about that?
Yep. None of it is
race.
biologically based on race. How about that?
Okay, so when you're interacting with African Americans, for example, do you ever get the impression that African Americans believe in their own existence in the way that I've described?
In the way that that's the same way I've described.
In other words, biologically, do you think that they think that they exist in that way?
Biologically, that they are different than me, as in they're.
Yeah, as in, do they have an expression in your view that they believe that their African ancestry has some kind of political meaning and that it can be found biologically?
Do I think
I know
that...
it's kind of a weird question.
I was going to say, do I think that when I talk to a black person, they think their fixation index is closer to 1 than it is to 0 with me? No, probably not, honestly, if I had to be honest.
There we go. Okay.
Do I think that they think that they're black and that means something? Yes, I think that means something too, but I've already established that. This is not... I don't know if you're trying to get me in a contradiction or gotcha, but no, I've already established that race is a social construct and it is real. Like, we have subjugated black people in the past, and not based on any biological reality, but based on a social one. And that's relevant, and we should counteract that. We should enact policies that fix that. I'm all for that. But do I think that genetically that a black person is going to do something because they're black, or they can't do something because they're black? Genetically? No, I don't think that.
Well, the thing is, I'm pointing out the connection of ancestry and motive energy, for example. Motive energy is a very strange term that I'm using to describe this. But if you say to people that the way in which you oppress them is based on a thing that is not actually a thing...
okay, reiterate my point to me, just to show that you understand. Reiterate my point to me when I think about race.
You're saying, and this is a point which I've heard many times before from many different people, you're saying that these things are social constructs which have been hypothesized to exist, except they don't have a biological reality, and so therefore everything that's going on is technically in the material world fake, but also real because of the fact that people's imaginations cause these things to become real.
Yes. Again, now, like money.
If a person were to believe that, then racial activism actually becomes impossible. And you're going to disagree with me here, but it becomes impossible when you start to think about it for more than 45 seconds, basically.
Oh, shit, you're right. You actually got me. No, you got me. All right, I'm going to close my bank account tomorrow because I don't think that money has a biological reality, so there's no use in believing in the social construct of money. You're right. You got me. I have been completely disowned in my logic.
I don't know why you're comparing it to money.
Because money is a social construct that is enormously important because we say it's important. When I say a social construct, we live... Okay, I'm putting on my Joker makeup right now, okay? We live in a society, and of course social constructs are important. But social constructs can change, and they change with culture.
Do you think that homosexuality is based on a biological reality?
I don't know or care. I think that it is largely rooted in genetics. I don't know if it's heritable or not, but it doesn't matter either way.
Okay, so how, and I ask this from a position of obviously supporting LGBT rights, but how do you think it's possible to advocate on behalf of LGBT rights if you also will not commit to an idea of whether this thing is a thing that's real?
Again, I don't think you're understanding me. I think that being gay is real. I'm saying that I'm a gay person. I'm a gay man. Let's wait, and this will be a fun time to read the chat. I don't care if
really
it's...
in reality? Like hypothetically or actually?
Like I'm actually married to a man. I'm sexually aroused by men. Yeah, it's real. But what I'm saying is I don't care if it's genetic or not. Whether or not it's true genetically, like if I inherited some sort of gay gene, or whether it was not, it was 100% the result of my environment, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for me to know that it's real and that I should advocate for it because it reduces suffering.
So would you say that my support for gay rights is, quote, misguided because of the fact that I support it for the wrong, quote unquote, wrong reason?
No, I don't care. If you're supporting, if you're
Like if I
supporting
say that I think that you're inherently the way that you are, and that I respect that, and that therefore I will elevate you to counteract the oppressions which you have been placed under in that particular sphere, would that be wrong?
No, I'm 100% consequentialist. If you are advocating for the thing that I'm advocating for and it results in the reduction of human suffering of LGBT people, yeah, that's fine. Nobody, there's going to be 1,000 different ways to approach that and 1,000 different ways to come to this conclusion. But yeah, the ultimate conclusion is the reduction of harm, the reduction of suffering. Yeah, of course I'm for that.
Okay. So let me propose to you the idea then, because you've talked about this human suffering thing quite a lot. So you're saying that to transpose this back to the racial issue, that even if you disagree with the way in which I arrive at the conclusion, if I propose to you a series of policy preferences based on the idea that ethnic groups exist and have a right to lands which they have traditionally inhabited, and I proposed it, and it was to reduce human suffering in your estimation, you would endorse it even though you don't agree with the fundamental logic of how I arrived at that conclusion.
All right, if you have a policy that is going to reduce human suffering and you can prove it, and you have a very good logical basis for it, you have a very good fundamental axiom for it, yeah. But the thing is, I think the policies you're advocating for, which is to give the Native Americans back their land, which that part I think is loaded, because what it actually means is deporting everyone who isn't Native American from west of the Mississippi.
Okay, so my next question to you then on this reduction of human suffering is, how do you measure reduction of human suffering? Like, is it measured by like just volume of people who are suffering versus not suffering? So for example, let's say that 9 people are oppressing 4 people, right? And then I advocate something to relieve those 4 people of the oppression to an extent, because perhaps you can't fully take away bad things that have happened to people, because obviously memory still exists, obviously. And, there's the lost time that comes obviously with forms of intergenerational oppression as well. But let's say that we came up with an idea that would raise the standards for the 4 people who are disadvantaged, but for the remainder of the 9, they would lose 10% of their wealth in doing so.
Yeah, sure.
Now, in terms of balance here, how would you measure that up? Would you say that you can't do that because of the fact that you're inflicting human suffering on the 9 in order to help the 4?
No. Losing 10% of your wealth, that might not increase your suffering whatsoever. There's a difference between increasing suffering and decreasing like material gain. Like if I lose, let's say I'm not wealthy, but I'm not in poverty. Let's say I lost my TV. Let's say I lost that. That would suck. I wouldn't like that, but it wouldn't increase my suffering. No, that's fine. If I lost 20% of my income, yeah, that means I can't afford food. That increases my suffering. If I made 3 times as much as I do now and I lost 20% of my income, I just can't afford to buy really nice things anymore. I can still afford all my basic needs. All my basic needs are met. That hierarchy of needs that we learned about in undergrad, yeah, all those things are met. So it wouldn't increase my suffering very much at all. If at all, I just wouldn't be as affluent. And if that kind of redistribution is going to lift people who are suffering because they don't have enough to have their basic needs met, yeah, of course I'm advocating for that. In fact, I do advocate for that on a regular basis.
Okay, then here's another scenario I'll present to you, because I want to see what will happen in this particular case as well, because we discussed the situation of secession before. So let's fast forward to 2024 again, and let's say that a group of people actually did engage in secession, took their own National Guard with them, and you ended up with basically the scenario that you said should not happen. So let's say that scenario happened, and the economic impacts are being felt. Which side, if there's going to be a, quote, conflict, which side of that conflict would you join, if any? Would you join the side that attempts to basically suppress it so that it doesn't happen because of the fact that it would raise human suffering?
I really don't understand this question in terms of...
In other words, I'm asking, would you actively fight against secessionists in another state if they seceded?
If I thought it was going to harm people, yeah. If I thought it was going to harm people.
Do you not see why, from my position and the axioms that I hold, that would seem like a reaction which is astonishing? The idea that someone in a different state has departed from your union, and that basically you have to now go over there and preemptively attack them because it would economically disadvantage you if they left.
Do you think the South were right to try to secede from the Union in the United States Civil War?
Well, I think we know why they were doing their little secession game at that point in time. They were seceding because they actually wanted to continue to carry out the institution of slavery so that they could essentially rip everyone off by having labor costs being zero
Yeah.
on certain industries.
So
I mean,
we
that
so
was
we
completely ridiculous, and we know it.
yeah.
And
So we agree
also,
that would have increased human suffering by quite a lot if they had
and the
succeeded.
reason, sure, and the reason we know that was their intention is because they literally wrote it down.
Yeah.
However,
I
the
agree
thing
with
that
that.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about is they're seceding because they're trying to get away from racists.
If they were
So
trying,
would you
tell you what,
essentially
if they could get, if they could
bring them back
actually,
into Eric Trump's America or something?
if they could actually get away, as in if they could like leave the United States and be in a safe place and not be oppressed anymore, because in this scenario, people of different races who are not white are being oppressed. Yeah, absolutely. The only reason I disagree with your scenario is because seceding from the United States within the United States, as in trying to take like Wyoming or something and say, well, now that's our land as this X group of people, you're going to get demolished. That's why I was against it. Not because it's morally wrong to want to escape oppression, but because that is going to create a lot more harm than it would have escaped.
Okay, but who is actually perpetrating that harm? The harm would be coming from the United States government itself, right?
Yeah.
So, like, why would you? So, I mean, who would you really hold responsible for that?
The United States government. It doesn't matter who I hold responsible for it. It's going to harm people.
Okay. Do you think it's possible to actually outwit the United States government in this way?
Oh,
I mean,
if it's Eric Trump's government, yeah, probably. But we would probably be a lot stronger together than we would be separately.
Okay, so what about this whole left coast secession thing? Let's say, for example, that the left coast states and the southwestern United States just departed from the US and started suddenly calling themselves, say, the Pacific States of America or something, right? Would you say that the United States of America should basically intervene against that and prevent it from happening if the people of those states really wanted to leave?
If they really wanted to leave, again, what do you think I'm going to ask you?
You're going to ask me, does it raise or reduce human suffering? Of course, I'm going to claim that it reduces human suffering. Otherwise, I wouldn't be advocating for it. So
Then I'd be for it too. No, then I'd be for it too. If that reduced human suffering and it could happen, I think, yeah, I'd advocate for that. Now, I don't think it would. That's why I would advocate against it. I think that fracturing humanity is generally a bad thing. It increases it increases hostility between people, because when you fracture, now you have two different groups of people created culturally, not racially, created culturally. And those people are going to be at odds with each other because they had different goals. The more we unify as a people, and when I say as a people, I mean as humans, the more we're all going to work towards the same goal.
So we've heard. But, I mean, the late Zbigniew Brzezinski had an interesting quote on that was in the Grand Chessboard, in which he pointed out that globalization is bringing us closer together because of the fact that we're all trading with each other, which is good and should continue to happen, obviously.
Yeah, you actually brought this up in JF's debate. You said that helping to trade with third world countries is going to lift them out of poverty.
Indeed. But at the same time, we encounter an interesting problem, which is that as people get brought closer together, they start to realize how different they actually are.
That's false. That's the data completely refutes that.
Okay, so are you saying that bear in mind, Zbigniew Brzezinski was a foreign policy advisor to Barack Obama? Just putting that out there for a second.
Do
you think that Brzezinski was giving him wrong advice when he pointed out that trying to force people together is probably a bad idea?
Well, that's not what you said. You said trying to force people together. Together, maybe.
That seems the direction you're going in, really, right? You're
saying I'm saying that if people freely associate with one another,
together, there's that things become better automatically.
Yeah, wow, isn't that way different than saying forcing people together? That's pretty different, right?
So, okay, you're saying that people coming together results in, well, good things happening, supposedly.
I'm saying that
I don't think that's uniformly true.
It doesn't have to be uniformly true. We're talking about global systems. What is generally true? That's how we have to talk about gigantic sociological data. And the data says, so for example, there was an experiment done on Mexican immigrants who exclusively spoke Spanish, waiting in a bus stop with white people. And they did, after 3 days, the white people had more animosity towards Mexican immigrants than they had previously. However, they continued the experiment, and that's where a lot of racists will stop. They continued the experiments, and after about a week or so, the white people who were sharing the bus with the Mexican people who were speaking Spanish had less animosity than they had before the experiment started. So yeah, it seems that just being with people and seeing that, actually, no, they're not all that different than me, does seem to reduce animosity, does seem to reduce hostility.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, how much was less? How much animosity was less animosity?
It just made it less. It could be, I don't know what the units were in the study, but less.
Do you think the animosity would have been even lesser if they had not spoken Spanish but spoke English? Which,
Probably.
by the way, they shouldn't do. They should actually speak their own language if they've got it, right?
Yes, and even if it might have been, but even with them speaking a different language, the animosity was still less after they spent about a week with them. After they realized, hey, these are just people. I've seen them every day. They're familiar to me now.
Okay, so on a cultural level, how long are ethnic minorities supposed to endure this? Like, are we supposed to
Ideally,
just be patient?
ideally, no time at all. I advocate for all minority groups advocating for their own rights. Right now, not a second longer is how long they should have to suffer. So let's advocate for policy positions right now to reduce that.
I just don't. I don't know what the world would look like under the ideas that you guys bring.
Don't say you guys. Say me. That's why you're talking to me, right?
I suppose so. So, to recap, then, you're against the position I took when I went on the JF show because of the fact that you end up having to acknowledge the existence of ethnicity as a political force based on a phylogenetic reality, or a social construct based on a phylogenetic reality. If you return.
No, I'm against the concept because
you say that it increases human suffering.
That's the okay. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so I'll put to you this one as well. The thing with Brazil, which is what started this whole conversation in the first place. Do you believe that the Amazon, insofar as it intersects with multiple settler colonial states in South America, do you believe that should actually be returned to the people who inhabit it, given that the individuals who are presently doling out the oppression don't even live inside the Amazon in the first place?
What do you think I'm going to say? If you could
tell
say
me
that's...
the answer. I already know what you're going to say, but tell me the answer.
Okay, I don't know enough about that to give you an informed opinion. Would you rather me lie
obviously
or give you an ignorant opinion?
I would claim that it would reduce human suffering to do what I want, which would be to give it back to them.
All right, so based on... Because I will admit, I'm ignorant in this topic. I don't know, and I'm not going to give you an ignorant opinion. I would rather abscond and say that, actually, I don't know enough about the topic to give you an opinion, so... That's what I'll say to there. But do you honestly think that I'm in favor of people burning down the Amazon?
No, I don't.
Okay. Why do you think that is?
But I'm saying that you're depriving the way that you argue is that you're depriving us of the political tools in your world. You're depriving us of many of the political tools to prevent this situation. Because again, if I say that the Amazon actually belongs to a particular group of people who have lived there for the entire time and are the actual owners of it, then suddenly we get lots of people who are liberals coming at me telling me that actually this is fascism. If I say that, I mean, it's such a bizarre criticism as well. To claim that it is fascism, supposedly, if I say that it actually belongs to the indigenous peoples of the Amazon and that they should be the stewards of it, and that way it probably wouldn't burn.
Do you think that we have a genetic link to the land that we grew up on?
Yes.
Genetic, okay.
And the reason I think so is because of the fact that you're surrounded by particular flora and fauna, and you have become accustomed to the stuff that is around you. You've been shaped by the land. I mean, as much as it may sound strange to say this is literally a Marxist position. That human beings
it's also a race realist position. Saying that you are genetically influenced by your ancestors, as in to such an extent that you are different than other people who do not share that same
when
ancestry.
Friedrich Engels said this, was he all right?
I don't care. If he said that, yeah. Okay, do I think that someone who was, 1800s had great views on race relations? No, probably not.
Really?
Yeah.
So even though his texts have been used for national liberation movements, you think he didn't have a great view on race relations when he made the point that people are shaped by the earth.
People are shaped by the earth. That doesn't mean anything. Did he think races were real?
I mean, did he think that? Do you think that I don't know? Do you think that the human race was spontaneously created from above or something?
No, I think the human evolved, of course. I think we all evolved. Yes, we did evolve in mostly from the same place. For the vast history of our evolution, we didn't grow up in very different environments. And this argument completely falls apart the second that two people from two quote-unquote racists, two quote-unquote races mix. The second that happens, everything flies out the window.
In fact, now you bring that up as well, which is the other thing that I'm being, quote, criticized for. So I pointed out to people, and this is probably the third time that I've done it now, I've pointed out that there is a thing going on which I've noticed in liberal online communities, which I've described as fetishization, in which you have white males, let's say, white males who have dominant positions in many of these communities, essentially engaging in what I would call inappropriate language and behavior toward women of color. And then if women of color say, this is actually fetishization, and what they're actually doing when they talk about this thing that they like to call mixing or blending or whatever word they have for it today, that what they're actually engaging when they describe these things in very graphic terms in view to us, almost in this kind of like, I don't know, this very odd tone of voice that they use when doing it. What they're actually doing is they're engaging in a white male dominance fantasy, and it's very icky.
Sure.
And so whenever I point this out, I have people then telling me that I might as well be the Klan, which is a very strange response to give to a woman of color who's pointing out that fetishization is bad.
Cool. Point it out to me. Let's see what I say.
Well, I just did. What do you think?
Cool. Yeah, that's
These are the arguments that have sprouted from it. The one I had with Jake, the one I'm having with Liberal Sanity Project on a consistent basis, and his followers who continue to try to follow me around on Twitter talking nonsense until they are blocked.
Cool. I'm not going to answer for anyone else. I think that's icky. Yeah, people who fetishize a different race and dehumanize them in that way. Yeah, that's icky.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, because it dehumanizes the other person and it increases suffering. It dehumanizes the other person, reduces them to a sexual object, and that's all they're for. They don't have dreams of their own.
This is exactly the argument I was making too. No, good. So we're on the same page there. Because yes, basically what they're doing is they're reducing the women of a whole other ethnic group into basically just objects for them to project their power into. That's what they're really doing, because it's one of those things. We actually saw this being written by a lot of critical theorists as well. That basically these guys will interact, and their way of doing their interaction is one that's purely along a dominance and hierarchical interaction.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. There's a reason that slavery in the United States had the slaves follow the condition of the mother rather than the father.
Say again?
So in slavery in the United States, slaves followed the condition of the mother rather than the father. And this is so that white male slave owners could rape black female slaves.
Oh yes, I brought that up as well.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
People were not impressed when I brought that up for some bizarre reason.
Well,
but
it's a
I'm
true
being asked
fact.
in the chat, how does this affect the real world? Well, it's because these observations actually come from the real world.
Okay, let's bring things back to the specific. When you say observations that affect the real world, can we bring it back to, I don't know, what were we discussing before this? Because I didn't disagree with you on fetishization is gross, that it has been used in the past as a power move to subjugate people of minority status. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, the reason I'm trying to anchor it back to real world is because someone in the chat was actually asking.
No, I got it. That's what I want to do.
They don't understand how it affects the real world.
Yeah,
the reason it affects the real world is because the first observations of this phenomenon were actually observed by. Well, there are a lot of people who observed it, but I think people need to read bell hooks on this, because she actually has some chapters in some of her works in which she actually just describes scenarios that she actually saw play out in front of her in the US, where it was clearly just absolutely gross things happening, except people would often shield themselves behind claims of being anti-racist in order to defray the backlash when people would ask questions. Usually women of color asking questions about, is this actually a dominance hierarchy you're creating here? To which they would then respond, no, we're just being anti-racist, of course. Nothing untoward to see here. And I think that's broadly the kind of reactions I've been getting as well over the past 2 weeks, in which I try to make a simple point about fetishization, and then everyone comes back to me and says, oh no, we're not doing that. This is just, nothing to see here, except for the fact that there's plenty to see.
So Ray, I've dated 3 black men and an Asian man and a man who was like a third Mexican, a third Asian, and a third white, I think. Do you think that I was fetishizing them when I did that? I agree. That's not a completely fair question, but could I have done that?
I can't know, because I don't know enough details.
No, that's fair. But do you think
what the trends are for the particular group that you're in?
No, that's fair. That's a fair. But do you think that it's possible that I just liked them as people?
Well, the reason I would say it's different in this case, and this is part of LGBT theory, if you like, is that basically when you're in a scenario where we're talking about homosexuality and so on, it's almost like it's a purer form of love because of the fact that it's decoupled from material concerns of reproduction. So,
But I want a
I
family.
think it would be a complete bless. So I think it would be a completely different dynamic as a result of that.
Yes, but I do want a family though. Like I want a whatever the goals of reproduction are. Like yeah, I'm not going to spread my genes, but I want to adopt and raise a family. And so of course I want to choose someone who's going to do that with me.
But I still think the dynamics of that are quite different from
that actually,
the idea of a man who wants to utilize a woman as a vessel for his fantasies. These things are two different things.
Yeah, it is, and JF is definitely that dude who wants to spread his seed via a vessel, who views women as vessels for his seed to carry on his genetic lineages. And I think we can both agree that he is really, really gross. And that if he has slept with 1,000 women who all left him, it's probably because he's just an awful person.
Well, I mean, I didn't at the time. I did not say these comments to him, but I mean, these are obviously questions that I would like to ask him on this vessels issue. But I mean, during the time we disagreed on a lot of things on feminism because obviously he has a particular viewpoint which I didn't agree with, obviously. So yes,
that's a very nice way to say it. Yeah,
I thought something was slightly wrong with the things he was saying on that.
Can we agree it's more than slightly wrong that every time he put his dick into a woman, he was prepared to marry her, and he wanted her to enter a contract into which she could not leave, because if he did not violate the contract, that is his right.
This is what he said, and I gave him pushback on that because I said that this is not usually the way that I would expect the conversation.
Actually,
however, he did do something that was quite interesting that I didn't expect that he would do. Right, and so I said to him, because we were talking about no-fault divorce at the time, I said to him, okay, so all of these reasons I presented to you as to why no-fault divorce should exist, you think that these things should be folded into the contract so that they can still be encompassed within contract law? And he said to that in response, yes. So in other words, all of the things that I have concerns about, he says that those things should actually be part of a marriage contract so that when people choose to exit the marriage because of the violation of them, then it wouldn't have taken place outside contract law.
That's not a huge win for you, though.
I thought that was an interesting response where I don't know.
He doesn't think that abuse exists.
Complete capitulation. I mean, that could almost be a complete capitulation. To the
not when you factor in, he doesn't think that abuse exists in America. He doesn't think that women are abused in America. He said that verbatim.
Sure, but I mean, operationally, he would simply be proven wrong because then people would still dissolve the marriages using the clauses that have been inserted into the marriage. In this scenario, into the marriage. What are those things called again? Contract.
Yeah,
into the marriage
but from his perspective, he doesn't think abuse is happening, and he thinks that women lie about it. Well, I mean, and so there's no risk in having that part in the contract because it doesn't happen because women lie. Did he actually
say that verbatim in the stream I was in, or was that in some other stream?
He said that. Okay, I wrote it down.
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, so he said
there's no abuse going on in the U.S.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, I disagree with him on that. I must have disagreed with him when he said it as well.
Yeah, I agree. Now he was. I'm not going to expect you to find every point, and I'm not going to hold that against you. But I'm telling you that this is the axiom he's working from. He doesn't think that abuses happen. And you saw the burden of proof that he said. He said that you should have a webcam going on at all times.
I disagreed with that as well, obviously.
Yeah, that's
saying that you should have cameras on 24/7 in order to find this. And
if I could point a good performance you had, it was that, like pointing out how fucking ridiculous that is. To have cameras on in your house at all times to make sure that no one spreads a false allegation or to catch things when they happen.
I'm not sure entirely why he brought those points to me. Because obviously I was not going to say
because he thinks that women lie about abuse, and he thinks that if there were cameras, it would prove that they lie. That's why he brought that up.
Or it was a test of some sort, or he was appealing to his audience. I mean, I can't know for sure. I mean, it was literally my first live stream with him, so I didn't go in. And this is, of course, the reason why I sounded cautious in many respects, is because I didn't know why he might ask me one or more questions, and I couldn't predict every question that he would ask me.
Oh, of course not. But I'm telling you, that's why he brought it up. He thinks that women aren't abused, and the contracts that he signed would be fine because it never happens, and that women should be subservient to men, and that actually, if a woman rises out of her place, it's not abuse.
He didn't say that either. I didn't get him to actually answer that question as well as to what
I think we can reasonably infer.
You could surmise it. You could surmise it from the fact that he tried to fight me over whether there should be employment.
Yeah, I think we could reasonably infer that he thinks women should be subservient to men based on that and everything else that he's ever said. These
are things I'll have to ask him and his audience about when/if I'm on another one of his streams. I'll put the question to him: has he considered that some of these views do not actually work out very well.
All right.
And the reason I'm charitable in asking these questions to people is because of the fact that when people have been in a particular chamber which contains echoes for you have the echo chamber going on for a while in a right wing movement, people start to think that the positions that they've held from time began are quite normal. And so, I mean, and in some contexts, perhaps they would be considered the norm, right? But that doesn't necessarily make those positions always right. So, I mean, obviously, I'd take him the alternatives and see how he responds to them. Because, I mean, yesterday when I was talking to him anyway, he didn't become like, angry and unreasonable when I presented to him the idea that, okay, well, what if you actually thought about it this way instead?
Hey, chat. Those of you, hold on. Can I speak to your chat real quick?
Nice with him about it.
Chat. So I have statistics from the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner contact sexual violence, and/or intimate partner stalking with impacts such as injury, fearfulness, post-traumatic stress disorder, use of victim services, contraction of sexually transmitted diseases, etc. This is commonly considered domestic violence. So those of you who are saying that it doesn't happen, or that women are lying, or that men are lying because it happens to men too, go fuck yourself.
He'd be wrong to make that claim, right? Yeah. So this is something that the next time around, we need to sort of delve more into that and find out why he thinks that.
All right, so I'm going to go back just a little bit because I broke this down to come back to it again. So since I'm going to adopt children, and since that you, correct me if I'm wrong, you think that culture plays heavily into genetic lineage, correct?
There's a relationship between these two things. One acts on the other is dialectical. There was one of these things where I had a thing that was a neat quote about it in which I used dialectical materialism to describe these things. But yes, it's dialectical, so it's not one does not lead the other. They mutually interact on each other.
Okay, so if let's say I adopt a little black girl. Me and my husband adopt a little black girl. Do you think that she is going to behave genetically predisposed to whatever her genetics say, or do you think she's going to be mostly influenced by culture, which is in part our raising, but also in large part to the culture she's raised in, and that includes all the racism and sexism? Which do you think is going to be more prevalent?
It's difficult to say. I mean, there's only one thing that I'd be able to say for sure in that scenario is that there may come a time at which she would wonder about the details of her heritage and so on, and then she'll ask questions.
Yeah, and we would answer them. But do you think that this is hard to say based on a one person's sample, but do you think that she would be more closely in line with us, her fathers, or a random black person?
It depends on a lot of factors, but I have a feeling that the person would feel inclined toward I don't know, feeling the struggles and stresses of the people who she clearly appears to come from in terms of the community that she originates from. Like, I mean, I wouldn't imagine. Although American,
yeah, but is this genetic though, or is it social?
Huh?
Is this genetic or is it social? Like, I feel kinship with LGBT people. There's no genetic basis for that. Like, I don't have any genetic link to LGBT people. We don't have a shared common heritage.
I'm not claiming that literally everything in the world is genetic. This is the thing that people keep coming at me with all the time.
But because you said a lot of things, like, for example, you said that someone with genetic links to a land are going to be more likely to care for it than people without genetic links to a land. But if you were born...
Yeah, I mean, that's a statistical likelihood.
Yeah, but if you were born and raised in a place... Yeah, if you were born and raised in a place, that is your home. That is your land. Why would you not want to see it protected?
Well, I'm sure we can...
And wouldn't it be great? I would say, wouldn't it be great if we could adopt those values of the Native Americans who do respect the land way more than we do? I wouldn't deny that for a second. Native Americans respect their lands. No, it should, though.
Yeah, but it has not. This is exactly the point that I'm making. I mean, we're looking at Brazil right now. The outcome of it would be nice if they would has turned out that they literally won't.
Jan DeWitt, no, sorry. You misinterpreted those studies quite a bit. I'm sorry. But oh shit, I lost my train of thought. Well, I'm sorry. Can you repeat what you said?
You had just asked me wouldn't it be nice if they would adopt the value system of the Native Americans that they originally displaced, and so they would be better stewards of the land. And I'm thinking, well, if they were going to do that, they would have done it by now.
We have a lot. A lot, like most Americans believe in climate change. Most Americans believe that environmentalism is a good thing. And in policy, that it doesn't really work because what most Americans think and what the actual policy positions aren't really dictated by popular opinion, but by the elected representatives we have in office and all of the inherent contradictions and inherent biases that they're going to have thanks to lobbying and whatever else my breath
but I
will
mean, the
allow.
clearest example of these things not occurring would be like classic cases, like what's going on in Brazil right now, in which basically they're just cutting the place down and burning it.
Yeah, because they've
right?
decreased environmental regulations and people want to increase profit.
Right. And who are the cultures that are the safeguards of the Amazon?
The same one that didn't do that.
Don't believe. Indeed, these are people who are actually on a cultural level, because of the fact that they've never had this, they actually don't believe in the utilization of the profit motive in the context of the forest.
Yeah, but don't other people also believe that?
People who do believe in the profit motive, or those who literally never had it and who are the original inhabitants of that
Those who
land?
don't believe in the profit motive as an incentive to destroy land, but I don't think that's unique to any one race.
Okay, so you would actually disagree. I'm actually going to bring this up and read it out, because this is one of those things where, again, if people are acting like I'm saying something that's quite strange here, when in fact there are academics that say this all the time, because that's where I'm getting it from. So hold on. Just hold on. I have to scroll down my own Twitter account to get to this. And scroll across. Right. So just reading from the article that The Intercept had up about this, which is on my Twitter timeline. Quote, Joaquim Francisco de Carvalho, a former chief of Brazil's Institute of Forest Development, estimates that 1 hectare of livestock or soy is worth between $25 and $250, while the same hectare of sustainably managed forest can yield as much as $850. So in other words, it's almost like it's more profitable, ironically, to not behave badly. But we go on. But the most important difference is one that can't be quantified. The latter approach preserves the Amazon's biodiversity and what the ethnobotanist and anthropologist Wade Davis calls its ethnosphere, the last remaining cultures that hold a worldview and values fundamentally different from those that brought us the Anthropocene epoch. The rainforest's original inhabitants are its most effective defenders precisely because they don't see it as a repository of resources to be extracted and sold, whether it be gold, lumber, or even carbon credits.
How much? What is the percentage of the native? What percentage of the population? What percentage of the population is Brazil comprised of those people? I'm sorry, I phrased that poorly.
I don't know that percentage offhand.
Well, do you think it's high or low?
It depends on the state, anyway.
All right, let's. Should we assume that it's similar to Native Americans in the United States, or is it probably larger?
Probably similar.
Probably similar. Okay, let's say
Oh.
it's similar to the United States, which is 0.9%, so less than 1%. If we gave it back to them, what happens to the 99% of people who live there? Wouldn't it be better if we
they just wouldn't live in the Amazon?
Yeah. So where would they live? What would happen to them?
The rest of Brazil, which they have seized anyway.
Yeah, but what happened? Like, all the people who grew up in the Amazon, is their home, and people who did advocate for it. So, do you think that everybody who wasn't a part of the natives who lived in the Amazon, think all of them wanted it burned down? Or do you think that was an extreme minority who just happened to have a lot of power?
I'm sure there's going to be a couple of people who are going to who.
Do you think it's a couple, or do you think it's the majority?
Okay, so you're saying you think the majority of Brazil should be able to just walk about in the Amazon then?
Walk about? No, I don't think. As long as it doesn't destroy it.
You know what I mean? As in that my idea of basically having natives regain control of that territory, because they're only 0.1 of the population of Brazil specifically. Let's hypothetically say it's 0.1. That they should not have access. Well, not access, but exclusive access to that tract of land.
I think that anything that would result in the immense harm of that land should be.
But it's not like Brazilians are actually. It's not like Brazilians are actually living in the forest.
No. So I would imagine it'd be something like the National Park Service here in the United States. There are parts of the park that are completely off limits to the public, regardless of where you're from, because we want to preserve the nature as much as possible.
Exactly. So why would that be wrong?
That's not wrong. I'm just saying that should it be linked genetically? Why can't it just be, okay, we have to preserve the Amazon rainforest. No one gets to destroy it.
Wait. So you would actually create a scenario in which even the natives themselves would not be able to be in the Amazon?
If they already live there, no, that's fine.
Okay. I mean, this seems like a really sort of roundabout way to go about not having. I mean, I don't know. Can you see from my perspective as to why I find this to be a bit weird?
I can see it from your perspective because you want to increase justice. And yes, what happened to a lot of Native Americans in history, and I say Native Americans in the broad sense, including those from Canada, South America, and the United States. Yeah, of course, there was a lot of injustices brought then. And it's horrible. And if we could go back in time and stop it, we probably should have, because it would decrease human suffering. However, what happens now is all that matters. We live like
Okay.
linear time is real. So what do we do about it now? How
Okay.
can
Do
we
you think
decrease their
it would be-
suffering now?
Okay, this is a question that I'll ask now on further on the Brazil thing that we've seen Brazilian right wingers sort of hyperventilating about for decades now, in which they believe that our eventual plan, and by our plan they mean people who are from outside Brazil but who don't like the way that Brazil has been treating the people of the Amazon, right? Peoples with the rest of the Amazon. They suspect that our ultimate goal is to actually allow the Amazon to secede entirely and to become its own thing, which they think is really a bad idea because they would like to not have natives in control of it, because obviously that's how they roll for some reason.
Can you
So, do you think that it would be a good idea that an efficient solution to this problem would be to just have the Amazon secede at some point and become its own thing? Perhaps even as an international territory administered via the United Nations.
Hey, you want to be you want to be super globalist and say that yes, places like the Amazon rainforest, those are off limits to everybody because now we're in a global government. Yeah, sure.
With the exception of the original inhabitants.
Sure.
So you would actually assent to that?
Yeah, as long as it was protected by everyone. Right now, this is a hypothetical. Right now, I don't think you're never going to kick out people out of the Amazon rainforest like without. I don't know. It's not going to happen. But if we were somehow to be more global and say that, hey, actually the Amazon rainforest is the planet's lungs, like we need to preserve it as much as possible. This is a global resource, and it should be protected. You can't burn it down for your own profits. Yeah, sure.
Okay, interesting. So, are there any other countries you can think of that you would apply the same logic to?
I'm terrible with my world knowledge. Yeah,
Okay.
all these
If someone was
stereotypes
gonna
about being a dumb white American who's privileged, yeah, those apply to me.
Okay, so if we applied the same logic to the Siberia scenario, would you be okay with that?
I don't know anything about
okay.
Siberia.
Okay, I'm gonna choose like a really just a standard country that like everyone's either been to or seen or just like I don't know, been like, can we not have more of this country, please, or something, right? Like when you've seen enough of a country and you kind of think to yourself, okay, what the hell is happening? Mm-hmm. So I'll just choose one at random. France. Do you think the same logic would apply to France?
Can you explain the logic specifically here?
Okay, well, let's say that France has green spaces because they're part of the common agricultural policy of the European Union. Do you think that it would be acceptable for the United Nations to say, well, the United Nations, let's say the European Union itself, because we're already talking about the EU, right? Do you think it would be acceptable for the EU to say that they're going to restrict the level of migration into France because of the fact that they're concerned that the French government will build on top of the green spaces that agriculture is supposed to be conducted on if they have too high of an immigration level? This is a really strange hypothetical I'm constructing here, but I just want to see how
it seems reasonable. In this case, I think that if you don't have physical accommodations for people, and it's not going to improve the people who are migrating there, it's not going to improve their positions, then they should probably be allocated elsewhere. Like if you're going to live in squalor and poverty and crime and stuff that is as bad as what you left, then yeah, that'd probably not be the best way to go. And the reducing the green space is probably not the best way to go. But again, if I had data going either way, that either option would reduce human suffering, that's what I would have to look up. Again, this is something that that I'm not very familiar with, and I would have to go from my fundamental axiom of reducing human suffering and look at all the data and look at all the points of contention and see which one is going to have the best outcome.
Okay, fair enough. Although I see that I'm being accused in the chat of I don't know, something I'm not actually doing here.
That's okay. Same here.
Yes, because I think that people in the chat have misinterpreted my question about France. Because of course the reason I was asking that question is because I wanted to see whether you'd apply the same preservationist logic that you had just assented to a completely different country in a completely different continent.
No, it's not. It's not a preservationist logic because that's not what I'm working from. Consequently, it might be preservationist in some instances, but the logic starts with reduce human suffering, and how do we get there? That's where the logic starts from. So sometimes that might be preservationist. Sometimes
Okay.
it might not.
This then leads to another question, because we talked about linear quote unquote time quite a lot in this conversation. So when you talk about reducing human suffering, are you talking about just the here and now, or are you talking about the distant future
Here and now
as
is
well?
all. Okay, first of all, here and now is all that matters. There is no future without here and now. That's all we can work with. That's all we can change right now. Now, if there's something that would reasonably say, okay, if you do a small amount of suffering now, it's going to reduce suffering a lot in the future, then yeah. But again, the only way to get to the future is now. So I'm sorry, that was a clumsy way to phrase that. If there was a policy, yeah, I'm sorry, if there was a policy position that said that, hey, for example, climate change. Let's make this really real. Hey, we need to increase prices on certain goods, increase prices on certain, increase taxes on certain power, certain ways of providing power to people. Yeah, that's going to cause a little bit of harm now, but let's make sure that harm is distributed amongst the people who it's going to harm the least, because the suffering that we're going to encounter in the future is going to be enormously greater.
Okay. Then I'll present to you an idea, and this is obviously a core part of third worldism. But what if I told you that global structural inequality is the root of economic crisis, and that the things which you said earlier on would increase human suffering would in fact in the long term reduce human suffering, because it would avert future economic crises by allowing people to elevate themselves to the level that the trade between people would be more equitable.
I would have to see. I would have
therefore result in less of a chance of economic crisis smacking people in the face, let's say in 2070 or so.
I would have to see a lot of data to support
the data.
To support the notion that fracturing people and becoming more divided and more fractured based on perceived innate characteristics is going to increase economic cooperation.
Okay,
that doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, let's say that we have national liberation movement in Vietnam, which already happened actually, because that's why the social state of Vietnam exists right now. But let's say that you have the state of Vietnam. Do you think that in terms of global rebalancing and reducing the precursors to economic crisis, that having a Vietnam that is itself and has defined itself and its boundaries and is capable of receiving investment, having production of that investment, having an orderly society in which they understand who they are and what they're about, and they go about doing the things they're doing, including the manufacturing and so on. Do you think that contributes more to reducing the probability of global imbalances, or less?
If I understood your statement correctly, can I rephrase it to you just to make sure I understood it?
Yep, go on.
All right, so if Vietnam was not oppressed by other people and they had more economic freedoms to determine their own destinies and to determine what economic practices are going to be best for them to compete on a global scale, that would be for the best. That would reduce human suffering, not only in Vietnam, but probably in other places too.
Okay.
Is that fairly accurate? Is that close to rephrasing what you said?
Sort of.
I'm sorry. I tried.
What I was getting at was that when you say that movements toward national liberation don't result in economic rebalancing, my point is going to be, well, they exactly do if they're done correctly.
Well, the one I disagreed with was people splintering off within the United States, like someone taking a state off and saying, actually, no, this is the Native American state, or no, actually, this is the black person state. That's what I was. That's way different than the example in Vietnam, right?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
You could say that Vietnam essentially split itself off from colonial systems that previously had overlapped it.
Let's say there was a specific ethnic group in Vietnam who had a bunch of historical oppression, and they are in a similar situation to America. Let's say that ethnic group decided that, hey, we're going to splinter off from Vietnam and we're going to do our own thing, but we're going to stay within Vietnam and we're going to seize this land from the state. Do you think that's going to be beneficial for them? Or do you think that the state of Vietnam is going to crack down on that because land is being taken from them?
It would possibly be beneficial for them if they pulled it off and the Vietnamese state was unable to prevent them from doing it.
Yeah, but do you think that they would be able to pull it off?
This is hypothetical because, of course, Vietnam has 87 different ethnic groups, actually. And, obviously the other 86, let's say, are quite small compared to the main group. But what Vietnam has done is, of course, they've set up various systems for dealing with the people, the ethnic minority groups they have in the country, and obviously they do keep the appropriate, where possible, they keep the appropriate amount of distance from interfering with people who don't want to be interfered with. Okay. So I mean, they have actually done multiculturalism in a way that broadly is correct. Like, I mean, I could say that there's probably some flaws, because there's always flaws in every implementation of this, but like, on the list of like countries that are doing it wrong, I would not put Vietnam high on that list.
So what would you say to white Americans who say that actually it would be in my best interest and to have my own state? If I just want to be around white people, I think I would get along better with them. So I want all that land that was promised to white Americans east of the Mississippi, I want that to be just white people. What would you say to them?
That would be interesting. I mean, I would doubt that they would sincerely come to me and say that. But I mean, if someone were to actually say that on the condition that basically they would give back the rest to someone else, that would be an interesting conversation to have. And I would obviously.
So to me, that's not interesting. It's a hard and easy no. Obviously not. No, we're not deporting black people from east of the Mississippi. No, we're not deporting anyone east of the Mississippi. We're not doing that. That's going to increase human suffering immensely.
Also, I've got people yelling at me in chat. I've got this one commenter who's been doing this for like, who's been doing this for like
he's a troll.
So I'm gonna actually answer his question anyway, because I feel like either he doesn't know things that I've said before, or he's pretending not to know. I mean,
he's trolled my channel before too.
How many times have I been asked the question on the issue of Europe, whether I think Europe is a place that Europeans live, and how many times have I responded in the affirmative to that question? Like, I mean, I think in the last 10 years, I must have answered that question roughly 99,000 times, and I've always answered it the same way, and yet still people come to me and tell me that I'm being inconsistent, even though I've been ruthlessly consistent to the point of being criticized constantly for that consistency by people to the left of my position.
You understand that when we...
I mean, that's literally part of the reason why we're having this controversy in the first place, which is because when people ask me the question of whether I apply the same logic that I'm using here to the European Union, for example, my answer to that question was yes, which was what got me into this trouble in the first place.
Because, and this actually brings it back way to the beginning, the exact first thing we said. The reason we say to all writers and to...
Oh, I understand. No, I understand what he's asking now. No, I have totally misinterpreted his question.
Don't
he says
give
to me
him the
that
time
I
of
finally
day.
answered when I said Europe, but I wouldn't answer when he said, quote, wide countries. I'll explain for you why I distinguish between these two things. Because the things that you refer to as wide countries, many of these things are actually secular colonial states, sir. Many of these things are settler colonial states, meaning that you are not the actual owners of these countries.
Moody.
So yeah, I'll answer you. So I'll answer Moody on the issue of Europe, for example, when he says that, is Europe a place where Europeans live? Surely, obviously. But when he does this bait and switch where he inserts this term white countries, that's a different question entirely.
Not to him. Moody, honey, white people don't exist.
Yeah, I'll wait for him to give a response. This is one of the first times that I've actually decided to just engage chat in this way.
Yeah.
But I'll wait for him. I'll wait for him to
He's not here to
give me a response,
change his mind or anything like that. He's a troll. White people don't exist. Sorry, honey. Black people are Europeans too. So are Asian people.
Well, this is your claim. This is not my claim. But I'm just saying that what he is trying to do here is he's trying to blur these lines so that he can actually claim that Australia somehow inherently belongs to Europeans from Europe, or that somehow magically the United States inherently belongs to Europeans from Europe. This is pure nonsense. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
I mean, I have to to say that outright. I mean, that is literally nonsense. I can't believe that.
Moody, sweetie, a black person born in Europe is more of a European than a white person born in Colorado will ever be. You know why? Because that's what makes a European. And you know what? If someone moves to Europe, they're European.
The thing is, this is not what I'm saying.
I'm saying that. That's all the respect he deserves.
If Europeans want to claim that Europe is European, sure, feel free to make this claim if you like. But if you want to claim that Canada is inherently European, then you're having a laugh, and you're not taking me seriously at this point. So it's just ridiculous. I mean, literally camping out on top of Native American land, telling me that it's what? It's a somehow a white country. I mean, I don't know. I am probably about 5/8 through this bottle of wine now, and I'm literally having to answer this question.
It's okay. I had an entire six-pack before this.
Yeah, I mean, after the entirety of everything that has been discussed in this past 2 weeks, I can't believe that someone actually came in the chat and now wants to berate me because I'm saying the United States is not inherently a white country. It literally isn't. It literally is not a white country.
Yes, and that's the arguments that I make when I argue with race realists and alt-righters. Because they say that we founded this country for white people, and therefore it belongs to white people. So the argument there is, well, we didn't found it. It was already founded, and we took it.
It was already indeed, it was already a thing, and then someone came in and started taking
so if you're
stuff over.
if you're going to
I don't know why
no, but because and this is why, if you're going to claim genetic lineage to a land, where do you start? At what point does your ancestry have to trace back to?
Now I'm being asked another interesting question.
Don't worry about it. It's
now
who cares about him?
it. Moody is asking, how does importing tens of millions of Africans into the US support Native American rights? To which I respond to him with a response that I have, again, given before. I have not supported that policy. Don't know where anyone got that idea from. And furthermore, who was the one that actually decided they were going to import people from the from the African continent into the United States? Because I'm actually pretty sure that was actually the Europeans who did that. Anyone want to correct me on that?
No, don't.
Pretty sure
engage.
that the reason that African people are in the Americas.
Don't engage with the moody Jews. Okay.
I mean, no. This is something that is interesting to touch on. That someone is accusingly asking me this question, me who never supported that policy, why his ancestors did a particular thing that he finds to be upsetting to him now. I mean, they did that. I didn't do that.
So to wrap up here, because it's been close to 2 hours. Do you think? Oh, you know what? You have the last question. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I've been asking all the questions. So
I've asked a few too.
The last one.
All right. Do you think that the policy that you have proposed in the United States, that's giving Native Americans back their land, which necessarily involves deporting anyone who is not Native American from west of the Mississippi to elsewhere, do you think that is going to help people as a whole? Black people, Asian people, Native American people included.
So rephrase that. I mean, you're asking whether balkanization would be helpful?
Do I think that today, if we were to implement this, where everyone who is not Native American had to leave the land west of the Mississippi, do you think that would increase or decrease human suffering?
I mean, that's a large reconfiguration you're going there. You're going with the maximal reconfiguration then.
It would be the just thing to do, right?
It would have to be done gradually, otherwise you're going to have economic shocks that are untoward. But I mean, if you played it out, I think I understand what you're asking here. I think that if you played it out on a long enough timeline, then it is possible that you would have prosperity on both sides.
Okay. Second question.
On a long enough timeline, like if we fast forward until we get onto the 2090s or something.
Genetically, what do you have to be considered Native American and to be able to claim ownership of land?
Well, I mean, they would obviously have to devise some way of determining this, which would obviously be through tribal councils. Defer to them on this issue. Like, we wouldn't want to prescribe for them how they're going to figure that out.
Okay. How should they?
I wouldn't want to step into the middle of that and be like, "Hey, let's see if we can devise a test." I mean, that would be ridiculous, obviously.
Okay. Well, what would you, if you were in charge? Let's say it was your ethnic group. Switch it with Native Americans. That's your ethnic group now. It's your quote unquote people. How much of quote your people do you have to be before you're your people?
Hold on.
This troll is going to go home full.
Also, the Solutrean hypothesis was disproven ages ago. So, yeah, he's basically asking about the Solutrean hypothesis, in which there's the false claim that was advocated at one point by a particular scientist who claimed somehow magically that Vikings had landed in North America and were there first. This is actually not true. And subsequent studies have disproven it. So I don't know. I mean, literally every single white supremacist claim about the Americas has probably been heard by me within the last 2 weeks. I think I've heard all of them condensed into the last 2 weeks, whereas previously I'd heard them scattered across the past 10 years. It's just been absolutely amazing.
All right, so to go back to my question, let's say that it was your people, the Native Americans, in the exact situation. Let's say you were Native American or whatever. How much of your people would someone have to be before they're your people? You're the arbiter.
This is one of those things where, if we're talking about Native Americans, I have been resistant to this idea, even though once upon a time I was wrong. Now I'm not, but I am now resistant to this idea, and by now I mean within the last 10 years. I'm resistant to the idea of trying to measure Native Americanness purely through blood quantum. So in terms of fractions, that is. And the reason for that is because we should be aware of the fact that they don't necessarily measure these things in the same way that we would. So again, defer to the tribal councils. Let them make that decision.
You're the tribal council.
That way no one
You're the tribal council. You.
Oh, if I'm the tribal council, well, that's probably not going to happen. But if I am the tribal council, then I mean, we're talking about anyone who is related.
Related.
And so what you would do, you would not actually have fractions. You would actually see, who is related to who and who is part of the community at the given time. That's the safest way to accomplish it without having to literally remove people from families. Because once you start doing that, then you're going to end up with the backlash being worse than the thing you're trying to do. And then everything will collapse.
So someone leaves your community.
On some issues you have to take the hit.
So someone leaves your community. They were 100% pure, your person. They go out into the world. They mate with someone who is 100% not their person, and they have a kid. And that kid has a kid with someone who is of a different race, and that kid has a kid with a person of a different race. Does that kid, the final one, get to come back into the tribe if they want to? They've studied their genetic lineage. This is the one that they have chosen that they want to identify with the most.
Problem there. I would not know the answers to that question. It really depends on the situation at the time. And furthermore, it's one of those things where the scenario you've just described is one that generally you would think that if you're going to be in that kind of revolutionary situation, you would want to avoid that. And so you'd want to really impress on your own people that this is probably not the optimal strategy to engage in. So, I mean, I don't know the answer to that question.
All right. So the big one, the one everyone wants to know: do you think that race mixing is bad?
Well, I mean, we've already actually covered that question, right? Where I said that when the power relations are such that they are, this is a form of fetishization in which people are imposing their own dominance over the other.
Do you think that this is generally what happens?
In fact, I think that was what Bell Hooks was actually calling the section that she was writing on. I think if people Googled it, Bell Hooks eating the other, as in eating the other, EATING, the other. And yeah, she describes in full exactly how that scenario works. In fact, I might even have it here.
I was going to say, while you're finding it, does that mean that all of us inherently have to see anyone who is not of our quote-unquote race as an other? That's something like that is within us. Can that not be overcome through culture or spending time with other races?
It remains to be seen.
It kind of has been seen. There are plenty of racists that are still around, but there are also plenty of people who don't fetishize other races, who just happen to like a person of a different race.
Found it. I think.
Chanduit, whatever ethnic group you're a part of, that's the one that needs to be reduced the most.
Don't say things like that, because then you're just going to get quoted. Not even as a joke.
Not even as a joke.
Never rise to those things, because basically people will quote you seriously afterwards.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to put on the record, he is joking. Whoever it was he was addressing there, he is of course joking.
Race is real and it's going to get you. It's behind me right now.
The unfortunate part about some of these comments, by the way, is that when people make the live chat look a certain way, it makes it very difficult at the end to not be censorious about it, because otherwise you just get in trouble, your whole channel.
Yeah.
So
Be
please,
censorious.
guys, please, people in the comments, do not.
No, y'all, that
Do
was me.
not
I'm vaping
take
up a
these
storm here.
Oh, right. Okay, you're the one that's vaping. I'm being accused of vaping.
Yeah, I'm vaping up a storm.
It's not me doing it. Okay, scrolling. Give me a second. Ahaha! Found it. So, quoting bell hooks directly here from Eating the Other, right? And hopefully people will be able to see my perspective on this. So, reading. And this is near the end now, so hopefully people can tolerate. But, quote, to make oneself vulnerable to the seduction of difference, to seek an encounter with the other does not require that one relinquish forever one's mainstream positionality. When race and ethnicity become commodified as resources for pleasure, the culture of specific groups, as well as the bodies of individuals, can be seen as constituting an alternative playground where members of dominating races, genders, and sexual practices affirm their power over, in intimate relations with the other. While teaching at Yale, I walked one bright spring day in the downtown area of New Haven, which is very close to campus and invariably brings one into contact with many of the poor black people who live nearby, and found myself walking behind a group of very blonde, very white jock-type boys. And then she has in brackets here, the downtown area was often talked about as an area where racist domination of African Americans by whites was contested on the sidewalks, as white people, usually male, often jocks, used their bodies to force African American people off the sidewalk, to push their bodies aside without ever looking or acknowledging their presence. She goes on, seemingly unaware of my presence, these young men talked about their plans to bleep as many girls from other racial/ethnic groups as they could, quote, catch before graduation. They, quote, ran it down. They said that African American girls were high on the list, Native American girls hard to find, and Asian girls, who they lumped all into the same category, were somehow deemed easier to entice and were considered prime targets, quote unquote.
Yep, all that's really
about
gross.
This overheard conversation with students, I found that it was commonly accepted that one, quote, shopped for sexual partners in the way that one, quote, shopped for courses at Yale, and that race and ethnicity was a serious category on which these selections were based. To these young males and their buddies, bleeping was a way to confront the other, as well as a way to make themselves over, to leave behind white innocence and enter a world of quote-unquote experience. As is often the case in this society, they were confident that non-white people had more life experience, were more worldly, sensual, and sexual because they were different. Getting a, quote, bit of the other, in this case engaging in sexual encounters with non-white females, was considered the ritual of transcendence, a movement out into a world of difference that would transform, an acceptable rite of passage. The direct objective was not simply to sexually possess the other, it was to also in some way be changed by the encounter. Quote, naturally, the presence of the other, the body of the other, was seen as existing to serve the ends of white male desires. And I won't continue reading because it just goes on.
No, I got you. I got the gist of it. Don't you think the best way to stop all of that is...
I have said the things that I've said on the basis that this is a thing that was real and remains real at the present moment, that I'm not a bad person for pointing out that this is a thing.
I'd never accuse you for pointing that.
And that it should be avoided.
I'm saying the way going forward, I think the way to make sure that we don't fetishize the other, that we don't subjugate the other, is to get rid of the concept of other. To stop viewing people of different races as different from us. Because scientifically, they are not. We have facts on our side. So to stop saying that black people are a certain way because they're black, or that white people are a certain way because they're white, or that Native American people are a certain way because they're Native American, or that Chinese people, or what have you. What if we got rid of the concept of other altogether? Because scientifically speaking, we have far more in common with each other than we do with our own races.
How are you going to then how are you going to accomplish that when the concept of other is also reinforced by the economic factors and by history itself?
By advocating for economic positions
that the world right now and be like, yeah, the first world exists, the third world also exists.
It does.
But let's just pretend that everyone is the same right now, because
that's not what I said. Everyone's not the same right now, but we are the same genetically, and we all deserve the same fundamental rights.
So,
do you agree that getting a white person in the first world, getting them to view a colored person in the third world, is one of the best ways we can do to garner sympathy for them and actually advocate on behalf of their rights?
What? Say again?
Do you think that getting a white person in the first world to see a person of color in the third world as fundamentally the same as them, as not an other, It was one of the best ways to garner empathy and kinship with them in order to advocate for the advancement of their human rights.
No, and I'll explain why. The reason why that would probably not solve the problem is because that would lead to the kind of color blindness which is now associated with all these boomer memes, in which they're just going to say a particular thing and then change nothing. Or you'd consequently get something quite different happening, which is that they would feel that they're entitled to go to other people's countries and basically engage in activities which would ordinarily be considered completely impolite. So let me give an example. If you were to say the other is not the other, and have basically, let's say, I don't know, white Americans who usually occupy a dominant position in the hierarchy, going over to a country which is, let's say, economically disadvantaged compared to their own, and, doing what you would expect is going to happen, which is, moving into positions of dominance within that society while also simultaneously claiming that there is no such thing as the other, it's going to undermine their ability to actually develop themselves.
All right.
Like, don't you think that it would be impossible? Okay, let me put it in a different way. Do you think that a national liberation movement would work if the same proponents of that national liberation movement were to simultaneously be claiming that they are not the other? Surely these things require each other in order for them to be actually coherent.
You can advocate for your own rights if you are a historically oppressed group by saying that no, I do not deserve this maltreatment. I deserve the same treatment as you. Because I am you. I am not lesser than you. You can advocate it based on that.
No, but it's also it's possible to say that people deserve to be treated equally because we are all human beings,
yes,
without simultaneously saying that there is no distinction between human beings.
There's a distinction between individual human beings, of course. There's no scientific basis for dividing them based on race, though.
Okay, so do you think that the United Nations is incorrect in the way that it treats the topic of genocide and the way that it treats the topic of ethnic groups because of the fact that it recognizes their existence in this way?
I've said that several times. Of course, people think that different ethnic groups are real.
Sure.
Yeah, of course, people think that ethnic groups are real. And we classify people based on that, but we also classify people based on, hey, these are Southerners. Hey, these are East Coasters. Hey, these are West Coasters. We classify people based on lots of things. All right. I'm saying that this isn't intrinsic to race. That there's no scientific basis for why an East Coast person and a West Coast person should be fundamentally different people. But there are different cultures they grew up in, and that's real and that's valid, and that's definitely something that we should take into consideration. But saying that someone is genetically predisposed to do a thing is race realism. It's something that all writers advocate for, and it's scientifically incorrect.
Well, I can see we're not going to close the gap on this one.
That's okay.
So,
fun.
in our closing things, we're already, well over the time that we normally would allocate for these things. But my other question to you then is obviously down to the drama issue now. So, do you accept that the behavior that has been exhibited by the people who disagree with me on this issue has been unacceptable?
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay, because I've been
like when people say that we should have nuked Japan twice or racist memes and stuff like that, even if they were being ironic, I don't agree with that at all.
Okay, and do you accept that this kind of behavior, if they think basically that it's going to somehow cause me or people who think the same way that I do to change their opinion, to change an opinion, if that's the behavior they bring by simply opening the conversation?
I'm not sure that was. I'm not sure that was the goal in the first place. I think the goal was to was ridicule, and I'm not saying ridicule in a bad way because I think racists, people who think that race is real and that people should be treated differently based on race, are people who do deserve to be ridiculed.
Okay, so you all would not be surprised to find that this kind of behavior would actually just cause people to double down on the positions that they had held. Like, if you're an ethnic minority group surrounded by people who you have a suspicion think these things, and then they present these things to you in Discord, for example, then would that not just be an affirmation of the thing that they've been accused of? It'd be almost like if I said to them, I have a strong suspicion that people hold these negative anti-Asian sentiments, And then they respond to this by saying, no, it is racist for you to believe that we think that way, but also we do think that way.
Yeah, I think that's a really terrible way to go about it. No, I'm saying if
the worst possible argument they could have come with.
No, I'm saying if they were what they're trolling, if they were trying to, and I'm not saying that as a justification. I'm saying that their goal wasn't to change minds, and which I think that's where the conversation should go. It should be to change minds, especially on fundamental things like this.
And also, they didn't accept the openness with which I came to the conversation with as well, at the beginning at least. Because obviously I'm less open now than I was at the beginning. But basically, yeah, they didn't accept the openness that I came to the conversation with. Because if they had responded in a way that was different, then I probably would have also responded in a way that was slightly different than how this whole thing played out.
Yeah, but do you think that...
Obviously, it's hard to feud with someone who is basically keeping their hands open.
Do you think that you were at all times cordial to people who approached you?
No, because I responded in some cases I responded in kind to things that people were doing. So like if you had a big pile in which people were engaging in basically anti-Asian sentiment directed toward me, then obviously they're going to have me snapping back at them.
Yes, but the snapback seems kind of selective. Like a lot of the people, like for example, calling Legend of Phoenix a bitch.
Well, I mean, was I wrong?
Yes. Like that, do you not agree that that's a sexist remark?
No, not really.
In this case, I think it could be reasonably construed that way.
I do not think it is. And plus, if they're going to claim that is what that is, which would be remarkable for them to claim so, then it would mean that literally everything they said to me was sexist then.
If anybody called you a bitch, that is a sexist remark.
Well, I mean, the entirety of their
what I'm saying,
disposition towards me was about sexual stuff. So I mean,
what I'm saying is, if you're looking at it
realm.
So if you're in there to convince people and to change minds, you have to realize that not everyone is going to see the entirety of the conversation, and not everyone's going to see the entirety of the conversation the way you are. So when you engage in toxic behavior right back at somebody, it kind of goes against your principle of being cordial enough to change minds, doesn't it?
Sure, but I just don't think that I have any accountability in that regard, because of the fact that if we're talking about cordiality, there's almost no one who was more cordial than me, given that I was there for weeks and didn't offend a single person. And then suddenly they decided they're offended by what? They're literally offended by someone being called a bitch, for example.
So it wasn't just that, it was you are advocating for a lot of race realist talking points. You seem to agree with...
Well, no, not really, because I mean, this whole conversation started because weird fetishism coming from, well, Liberal Sanity Project himself and Shadow Ninja, who are basically... and others who are basically saying things that ordinarily you would consider to be really, really sketch and quite gross, right? So, I mean, they should not be surprised that I give pushback on that.
You also have an equivocation between...
It's not like I entered the server and was like, hey, guys, we need to have a conversation about a controversial thing.
In this conversation with me...
No, they brought it to me.
In this conversation with me about 15 minutes ago, you equivocated any person of a power structure, so we'll say white people now. Any white person who engages in a relationship with a black person or a minority group in general is fetishizing them. You made a heavy implication that you were equivocating that. And in that case, you're kind of saying that basically white people and black people, or white people in any other racial or ethnic group, are always going to see themselves as the other. And based on the comments you said in the past, you say that otherness is based on a phylogenetic reality. So there's some basis in reality for doing that. That there's a basis in reality.
And for some very interesting reason, they found the concerns linked with that were offensive to them, which is quite interesting. Given that this is, think about it from my perspective. I mean, what level of entitlement are we on when we're dealing with people who have the entitlement to the things that they're saying, and then when someone gives them pushback and says, "Well, here's another perspective in which actually what you're doing might be oppressive," then suddenly it's like, well, we are now wounded by this, and so we're going to spend the next 2 weeks trying to call you a Nazi because you have said this thing. Right. So I think that's quite an interesting thing, and also it's completely upside down as well, given that basically it is people who are adjacent to whiteness telling me that I'm nazistic because of the fact that I have suspicions about their motives.
Right, I've legitimately...
I didn't know that Adolf Hitler was a great champion of Native American rights. Nor did I know that Adolf Hitler was a champion of black civil rights. Nor did I know that Adolf Hitler was somehow the greatest champion of Hispanic rights at the border. I have been as charitable as I could possibly be, or at least I've made the best faith effort I could to be as charitable as I could to your positions. And a lot of your positions do seem to indicate that you think race is real.
that it's something that we genetically act upon, and that we
And
are
why do
always
people
going to
think this is
see.
a bad thing? Why do people think it is a bad thing for racial politics to be taken seriously, and for race itself to be taken seriously as a thing that is real?
Because to do that, we have to acknowledge that different racial groups are others, and that because they are others, they're not us. And we are going to advocate for us before we advocate for them. This necessarily creates a lot more suffering in the world because if there are a ton of different us's, all of us are going to have different disparate goals. And so
Well,
the more we come,
if we're not allowed to support ourselves, and I say this is another one of those sort of person of color complaints, I know, but if we're not allowed to support ourselves, who will?
us. What if we all said all of us are ourselves? What if we broadened the definition of ourselves to include people who do not look like us?
Why
You
does
laugh,
this
but that's what.
this way?
No, because that is the direction that progress.
It's not really gonna happen.
That is the direct. It is going that way. It might never get there, but going that way is the way things have been going and how things should continue to go.
It seems so remote to me as a person who is currently sitting in a country that's experiencing the phenomenon known as Brexit. Right? I mean, as soon as Brexit began, by what percentage did hate crimes in this country increase?
A lot. Yeah.
Loads.
Yeah.
So I mean, what universe am I supposed to imagine a scenario in which where we don't look out for ourselves, but the 86% majority in the United Kingdom decides it's going to
understand
be
that you understand that I'm a
minority.
You understand that I am a gay person living in an extremely conservative part of the United States, correct?
Sure, yes.
Okay, I'm advocating for myself. I'm advocating for myself as an LGBT person. I want everybody to advocate for me too. That includes straight people. I want people who are not LGBT to advocate for me too. I need them because they are like me. They want the reduction of human suffering. They are like me. They are me.
I'm sure it would be nice, but it's one of those.
It's not nice
where you have to rely. You have to make sure that you rely on yourself and your own group first.
Of course,
because you can't trust that the other is going to support you, particularly if they outnumber you and you're a minority in a state.
If they outnumber us, then we raise our voices and they to make them listen, and then they become us. That's what we're doing. We don't do that by saying, well, being LGBT, we are othered. We're just going to go into our own enclaves because we're so much different. Now, I realize that's not a one-to-one analogy for people of color, but that's also a thing. If you like, I want white people to advocate on behalf of people of color everywhere. That's how we're going to reduce human suffering, because people of color are like me. That is my in-group.
Okay. Do you not think that there's a level of I don't want to use the word arrogance, but I'm having to use it. But a level of arrogance to arrogate to yourself the lived experiences of the other by claiming that you are just like them.
Probably, but I still
exactly. I mean, would that not be? I mean, I just don't understand how people could say that.
Because I don't want them to fucking suffer. Like, I feel empathy when I see people suffering because I see them.
But, I mean, do you not think that this too, in a sense, is a form of racism because of the fact that you're saying that the other is the same as you and therefore ceases to functionally, and therefore is functionally not existent?
Functionally not existent.
Isn't that a form of racism as well?
For our 2-hour conversation, is that really what you think my position is? That I think that
I'm just asking how would you prevent others from arriving at that conclusion? Because if taken at face value, what you're saying here could quite easily slide to be in that position.
My position from the beginning, and I've been extremely consistent on this, is that even though race has no scientific basis, there is no phylogenetic reality to speak of. It's not a legitimate taxonomic unit. People still perceive it as real. So it is a social reality, and social realities influence policy and influence economic decisions that have historically marginalized large swaths of people. And so, because of that, we need to reverse or heavily influence those previous economic decisions in order to help disproportionately marginalized people. So we advocate for policies that do disproportionately impact Black people and disproportionately impact Native American people. We do advocate for those because those are the people who are suffering the most right now in the United States. But to do that, all of us need to do that. It can't just be Native Americans fighting for Native Americans. If you have 0.9% of the population fighting for the rights of the 0.9% of the population, guess what never gets done?
No, but the thing that I'm trying to get at here is that what are you when you say that you're fighting for their rights, or that you advocate that people who are outside the group should fight for their rights, which I agree would be a nice thing to do. I mean, that would be good.
It's the
But
only way to move forward.
the way in which you are doing it, if you were to say that you're doing it because you don't think that they are in any way different from you,
I don't think
then
they are meaningfully different from me in a way that any other person is meaningfully different from me.
so then what is special about the thing that you are doing there then?
Because it's reducing human suffering. I mean, I've acknowledged that there are people who have experienced immense amounts of human suffering based on social constructs. We can acknowledge those, and then we can advocate for policies that disproportionately reverse that.
Okay, so I mean, this is going to sound like a semantic question, but I guess we're coming down to the end now anyway, so I'll try to wrap this up quickly.
Okay. Yeah,
So I'm sure you've heard about the thing, which I think we are all taught about, and we're obviously all taught about. You know, when you're particularly when you're in certain occupations, you're constantly taught about this. And it's the issue of the multicultural, multi-ethnic society, which celebrates diversity. And I say this obviously without any tongue-in-cheekness and with no hint of sarcasm. This issue of diversity, how can on the one hand you say that you support diversity, and I'm not saying that you've actually said this, but I'm just saying that how will people
you can talk to me because I do, yeah.
Okay, so how can you support diversity on the one hand, but then also assert that everyone is the same? Now, I mean, I like to think that I am consistent on this because at least my support for a multicultural and multi-ethnic arrangement in countries which have legally and deliberately had populations that voted for this on purpose, you know, it makes sense then because of the fact that the word multi is on there. So you would expect that there would be diversity and not uniformity, and that you would respect the boundaries of the different groups that are diverse in this case, because you're trying to make sure that diversity of thought and the diversity of social practices continues, because it leads to different ways of looking at solving different problems in the workplace, different ways of looking at solving social issues and so on, and it, quote, makes you stronger, supposedly. So how do you endorse that on the one hand, but then on the other hand also say there's no difference between people?
So let's narrow that down. Let's say diversity in media, just as a, not a catch-all, but as a specific example to make it easier, a little bit easier for me to phrase my opinion here. So because a lot of portrayals in media have been artificially limited to straight white people, it increases anytime you see someone of a different race or a different, even gender in a lot of places, or especially a different sexual orientation or gender identity, their difference and their otherness is immediately apparent. So it others them to you. However, if we increase the diversity in media and make it so that black people can just be a normal protagonist and it doesn't have to be centered around them being black, or a gay person can just exist and their plot lines don't revolve around them being gay, it's just a side option, or rather it's not the most quintessential part of their character, or when more movies do pass the Bechdel test, then it decreases the amount of otherness that we see. So it's not because I value diversity, not because that we're different, but because we're the same, and we've been artificially limiting the default to straight and white for too long.
So it's almost like you have a completely different perspective on why it is that these things are occurring. So would you be surprised if I told you that I think the reason why diversity in media has been so good is because of the fact that it's precisely because of the presentation of the other in a light that is seen as affirmative as opposed to negative, increases the morale of the community from which that person comes from.
Of course.
And raises and sort of raises that community's profile. In other words, it's strengthening that community in its confidence in itself, as opposed to asserting that everyone is the same and it doesn't even matter.
That's not in conflict with what I said at all. Of course. Who's mine? Who in this guy like
something about this seems contradictory. Perhaps I'm too far down the line of alcohol at this point to be able to actually detect it. But something seems contradictory here. I'm just not sure where you've done it.
Okay, well you can go back and watch. I thought I've been very, very consistent in all of my positions. You're welcome to go back and watch it and tell me later. Okay.
Because it was somewhere in that thing where you were talking about diversity, but somehow also the same. I lost track somewhere as to how that could possibly be so.
Okay, I can rephrase my position again. Let's see if I can rephrase it in the same way. So if we are accustomed to seeing, because again I used media as the example, to seeing that the default is a straight white male, that is a default protagonist, and there must be a reason to deviate from that. Well, if we deviate from it more and make the because if that's your default and there needs to be a reason to deviate from that, it's creates a sense of the other. There needs to be a reason for someone who's not a straight white male to be a protagonist. Well, increasing diversity is one. Yes, it is definitely going to increase the spirits of any kind of marginalized community who don't see themselves portrayed in the media they consume. Of course, it's going to raise their spirits. It's also, and this is really important, because the people who, if you are wanting to increase the or decrease the amount of suffering a marginalized group of person has, the people you need to convince are the people who are enforcing the suffering or who might perpetuate that suffering. So, for example, I grew up I did not meet a black person until I was in college. However, thanks to the media I consumed, I did see a lot of black people on television. I remember Hey Arnold being a specific example. Just seeing all these different people coexist with one another, even though I'd never seen anybody who wasn't white in real life, because I lived in a very, very tiny town, led me to believe, hey, some people are, they look different, but they can be my friend just as much as anyone else can. And it's their personality, and it's them who is a person is who I should focus on. That seems idealized, but I'm just telling you that is my lived experience.
Well, I mean, it seems I don't know which angle to address that from. It's one of those. It's one of those things where I don't know. It just seems very
Okay.
odd to me that after that, we've been through quite a lot to get to the point where
Yeah, we've been through
as
2.5
as
hours.
minority groups, we can be respected as who we are, what we are, and to defend it. And then
I've always agreed with that.
we
Yeah.
have this problem with liberals basically saying that it's all the same in the end, which kind of invalidates the struggle. That's just how it feels to me. It just kind of invalidates the struggle when that happens, because then what was it all for then? If we took what you were saying as true,
To be treated as equal. Like, if you're not being treated as equal to what?
it's one thing to be, and we're not talking about, well, treated as equal is one thing, but being the same is a different thing. Like, I mean, the whole point is that we are not the same, but we should be treated equally.
Do you? Okay.
I
Well,
mean, I thought that was the purpose of social justice.
I feel like I could ask you 1,000 more questions, but we've already gone on for 2.5 hours. So do you want to wrap it up here?
Yes, we could. I mean, obviously, there may have to be other streams later on this topic, even though it's been going on for quite a while on addressing these. But yeah, it's just, well, we will have to have another stream on this at some point.
Okay.
But yeah, it's been quite good. Like, I mean, overall, you've been pretty cordial. You did answer all of the questions in some way, even though I didn't like all of the answers.
I tried.
Right. So we will we'll call it a day, and we'll see where we end up. Of course, I'm going to have to go through the chat at some point to make sure that we haven't got anyone who's actually violated YouTube's terms of service. And I'm relatively sure that neither of the two of us violated terms of services while we were having this conversation, did we? Thinking back now. Yeah, neither of us did anything that was outside the terms of service either. So I think we're covered, and I think everyone has been pretty good, just about, with the exception of some people in chat. Right, so we'll call it a day. I mean, is there anything else you got to say that you want to say before we go?
Nah, I'm fine ending it there.
Okay. All right. We'll see you all later. This was obviously a stream that took place not on the time that's actually written on the stream, because usually this is supposed to happen on Saturday at 2100. But we just impromptu just had like a stream in the middle of the week because we just wanted to. So sometimes this happens, and that's why you need to sort of watch out for the alerts if you're subscribed to my channel, because occasionally we'll just start a stream out of nowhere, and you can show up if you want to hear it. Right. So I'll see you all later. And thanks for showing up.
Bye, everyone.